All right. Welcome back to the live show. You know what time it is? It is currently 2:42 a.m. and of course today's date is the 24th of June 2025. Yes, it is officially summer. It is hot. Hot. All right. Good news, ladies and gentlemen. Good news. Now, of course, some of you know that the commander in chief, the 45th, now the 47th President of the United States, has announced that between Israel and Iran, there's been a ceasefire deal that has been agreed upon between both parties, and it's been brought to his attention that they're now ready for a ceasefire, which I predicted a couple of days ago. Every single day throughout the 12 days that this has been going on between Israel and Iran, I said, have some faith, have a little faith in the commander in chief because God put him there for a reason. And a lot of people, even conservatives, were like, you know what? This doesn't mean uh, this may be a 20-year war like Iraq or Afghanistan. And it's like, no, this man is a different breed entirely. This is a different type of leader. The United States now has a different leadership in the Oval Office. So, like I mentioned earlier on, God is in control. There's no point putting fear in people's heart and fear mongering Americans. There's a lot going on in this world. Everybody has their own issues that they're dealing with. Okay. People have family issues, financial issue, mental issues, so there's no point trying to fearmonger Americans even more. Okay. So please, y'all, now it has been confirmed that there is a ceasefire deal. But guess what? Guess what? Some people are actually not happy about this news. And they're not actually from another country. They are Americans not happy about this ceasefire deal. So they are putting out content, putting out videos, putting out fear mongering content talking about this isn't a ceasefire deal because Iran has not agreed to it. What are you talking about? You're supposed to be saying, America, our president that we voted for has now announced there is a ceasefire deal. Let's be happy. Let's rejoice over that. And let's hope and pray that nobody actually retaliates or respond. But I guess if there's no war, if there's no dispute, these folks have nothing to say. It's like, what is going on with us as a country? Can we come back to our senses and realize that it's okay to have peace? The same people talking about, well, Trump is going to send American troops on the floor to the battleground are the same people saying, well, Iran never said anything about peace deal, so Trump is a liar. No. Can we change the narrative? Can we try that? All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I always say, it is a free speech channel. All right, say what you want. Liberals, conservative, Republicans, Democrat, it doesn't matter. All right, as long as you respect the channel and also you respect the United States, you are not allowed to say anything bad about the United States. Look, that's the only thing I ask. Okay. You're not allowed to say anything bad about the United States. Okay. Because I believe America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. And that's it. That's my opinion. You can have yours, but don't come up here talking about anything bad about the United States. that gives you shelter, water, family, freedom, free will. Now you're not going to do that, okay? We're going to respect this land, okay? Because the veterans and the military personnel bled and died for this land, okay? So I am grateful to the veterans. I'm grateful to the military personnel. Thank you for your service. With that being said, enjoy the show.
Iranians chanting death to America and waving down with the USA flags, taking over the streets of Tehran after Operation Midnight Hammer. Iran's president even seen at one of these protests condemning U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Deputy Director of the U.S. Office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, Alireza Jafarzadeh, joins me now. Alireza, great to see you as always. These protesters are what the regime in Iran wants us to see. But what are you hearing from your sources as to how the majority of Iranians actually viewed these strikes?
Well, certainly, Todd, this is the most the regime could do, just line up their own forces into the streets. And remember, for the past 4 years, the Ayatollahs have been doing these kind of rallies, chanting death to America, death to Israel, death to the MEK, which is the main opposition movement in Iran that is actually responsible for exposing much of the nuclear sites in Iran. That's where they're concerned. The regime is benefiting at this time because everyone is so focused on the situation of the war and everything, but they know once the war ends, the population have rejected this regime over the years. The mullahs benefited from the policy of appeasement when we exposed these nuclear sites in Natanz, in Fordo, in so many other sites, the world had a chance to stop them. They didn't. They gave them concessions. They gave them money. They legitimized the whole program. Now that era is over. The regime is facing a very important existential threat, and that's the people of Iran. Remember, there have been several rounds of major uprisings in Iran since 2018. People chanting death to the dictator, death to the oppressor, being the Shah or the supreme leader. That's where the real threat is, and that's why our leader, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, she right after the strikes, she said, now is the time for Khamenei to go. Okay. Now is the time for the opportunity, neither concessions or appeasement, nor war. Now is the time for standing on the side of the people of Iran to end the rule of the clerics, standing on the side of those resistance units who are confronting the Revolutionary Guard.
So that begs the question, does it happen? What ultimately comes next? While Secretary Hegseth said in that press conference yesterday that this strike was not about regime change, President Trump really did leave the door open in this Truth Social post yesterday. Quote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" And then he writes, "MAGA, make Iran great again." You are one of the most foremost experts on possible regime change in Iran. Do you expect it to happen ultimately now following these strikes?
Well, certainly the position that President Trump has taken and the U.S. administration is prudent because no one is asking the United States to do the fighting for the people of Iran or the Western nations the same way. There is no need for boots on the ground or appropriation of money. Unfortunately, the policy in the past 30 years has been exactly the opposite, giving pallets of cash to the mullahs, legitimizing the regime, neglecting or rejecting the people. Now the situation has turned. It's a great opportunity for the outside world to see the realities, as President Trump said, that is upon the people of Iran to bring down the mullahs. And let me tell you, there's not going to be chaos after the fall of the Ayatollahs. Mrs. Mariam Rajavi has introduced a 10-point platform for the future of Iran based on separation of religion and state, gender equality, peace in the Middle East, and a non-nuclear republic form of government. She has defined a transitional period that after the fall of the Ayatollahs, within 6 months, there's going to be free and fair elections leading to the formation of a national and constituent assembly, and it will be the representatives of the people of Iran who will determine the future of the course. So everything is very clear. One thing is well known now is that the mullahs must go. All the indications are there. The regime relied heavily on the nuclear weapons program to stay in power. They spent $2 trillion on that. They spent money on the proxies. All of that is now gone. Now is the opportunity for change.
We will be watching. And the fact that you mentioned a woman possibly taking charge in the Middle East, in Iran, of all places, is absolutely shocking. Before we let you go, about 3 hours ago, the Iranian deputy foreign minister said, quote, "We will continue uranium enrichment. No one can tell us what to do," sounding like my 5-year-old. Can the regime back up that bluster?
Well, you know, that's their modus operandi for the past 4 decades. They just make statements and, you know, rhetoric, but the reality on the ground is so different. Remember, this regime is not the same regime that was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. They lost much of their clout in the whole region. Their biggest ally, Assad, is gone. Hezbollah, Houthis, the Shia militias, they have been badly shattered. The people of Iran are against them. They lost the nuclear weapons program, which was meant to guarantee the survival of the regime. All of that is gone. So they can talk as much as they want until the last day that they fall. This is the policy of all of the dictators. They seem to be and talk the way that they're invincible until they fall.
Alireza Jafarzadeh, a true expert in all issues Iranian. We appreciate you lending us your insight this morning. Thank you, sir.
God bless the United States. God bless our troops. God bless the President of the United States. He has done what he promised. He said he would create an avenue for the world to be peaceful, and he's keeping to his words. I know most people would not actually believe this, but this is actually happening. There's been a ceasefire. God, thank you. Here we go.
We are back with a Fox News alert. A senior Border Patrol source revealing to Fox that over 1,500 Iranian nationals were caught at the southern border during the Biden administration. And now the Trump White House is preparing for possible sleeper cell attacks in the U.S. after Operation Midnight Hammer.
We know that a lot of people who we don't have full accounting of were let in over the last 4 years under the Biden administration. We know that some of those people were on terrorism watch lists.
There's no doubt the Iranian regime has tried to put active agents on the ground. That'll be a method by which the Iranians will choose to try and take vengeance and respond and to deter the United States.
We know that some terrorists have crossed that border. We'd be a fool to think zero cross. Between ICE and the Bureau, we've removed thousands of national security threats because of President Trump's leadership on this.
Former Deputy Assistant DHS Secretary and former Acting ICE Director Jonathan Fahey joins me now. Jonathan, how vulnerable are we to terrorist activity here in the U.S.?
We're very vulnerable to the extent that we don't even know who's here. So we don't know who's here, what they're doing. So this really goes back to what we've talked about so many times. The Biden open border left us vulnerable. The scary thing about it is the 1,500 that were caught, half were released into the country, but that doesn't even tell anywhere near the full story, because we know that we had about 2 million known gotaways come into the country during the Biden administration, and all these countries that wanted to harm us, including Iran, knew that they could get anyone across our border, that the Biden administration had no interest in protecting national security. So we should be very concerned. I'm sure the FBI, DHS has been all over this, particularly recently, tracking these people, finding them, and then trying to remove them, and we'll see how that goes. But yes, we should be alarmed, we should be concerned, but I do think they're focusing on it.
Okay, so the Houthis have already said that Washington needs to be attacked. So what are the chances of a lone wolf, not directly linked to Iran, but being inspired by this to attack the United States? Does that concern you more than an Iranian government orchestrated attack that can be proven and linked back to the Ayatollah?
Well, I think they're both concerning. Sort of the lone wolf attack is the scary thing about that is that's so hard to catch somebody if it's just one actor. And we know, one individual can do severe damage and also cause a lot of fear and everything else. But probably the greater concern as far as more devastation and loss of lives is probably a more coordinated cell coordinating with Iran or some other terrorist organization, because they'd have the ability, maybe expertise to do something more harmful. But certainly both are concerning, and it just shows that at our border, it's not only important to stop people from coming in, but anyone that comes in should be vetted, not just, to make sure they are loyal to the United States, not just that they want to work or something else, because we should not have to be vulnerable because of political decisions made by the prior administration, where all they seem to care about were bringing in as many illegal aliens as possible, and national security and public safety seem to be simply just an afterthought for them.
Okay, so what is DHS doing right now to keep Americans safe? Is there anything that our agencies weren't doing on Friday that is being done right now?
I don't know if there's anything they weren't doing, but my guess is they're ramping up anything on people from countries that are known countries of terrorists, particularly Iran, but other terrorist countries. So they're probably tracking these people down. They're also, what they've been doing is basically we've shut down the border, so nobody new is getting in. I shouldn't say nobody, because it's certainly possible some people are getting through. So they made it harder to get in, and then if you're here, it's harder to stay. And they're also actively removing illegal aliens. So all of these things are good. You do look back at the Aliens Enemies Act when President Trump invoked that for the Venezuelans and MS-13, and it does show how important tools like that are for the Trump administration or any administration to be able to remove dangerous or at least potentially dangerous people from the country and put American safety first and foremost ahead of all of these other interests.
Would you advise people to change their daily lives, their routines, not go to concerts, fly, take the subway? What about those sorts of changes?
I don't think that should be advisable now. It doesn't mean that there's not risk of things happening, but I don't think there's any reason to think that now. And I think if there was, the government would be advising people of that. And I'm sure the certain things you always hear, if you see something, say something. And people should at least be alert if they're seeing unusual behavior with people they see, or if they're in public places. But I don't think right now there's any reason people should alter their lives. And I'm sure if there was, the government, DHS, the White House would put out warnings, specific advisements. But right now it does seem like people should continue on doing what they're doing and just being alert.
A concerning element to this, which makes it all the more important to discuss. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
God is the greatest. We are going to make it through.
Who we don't have full accounting of were let in over the last 4 years under the Biden administration. We know that some of those people were on terrorism watch lists, and this is one of the reasons why border security is national security. Is if you let a bunch of crazy people into your country, those crazy people can eventually take action. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that doesn't happen and to keep Americans safe.
There you go. The vice president yesterday on Meet the Press. The White House warning about dangers of sleeper cells lurking here in the U.S. Why would they think that? Well, for the last 4 years of Joe Biden's policies, we've let in over 1,500 Iranian nationals. This is from the Border Patrol. Bill Malugin got this last night. And guess what? Over 700 were allowed to stay. Senate Intel Committee Chair Tom Cotton knows all about it. Senator, when you talk about reprisals, people think about sleeper cells here. Do they have a right to be concerned?
Good morning, Brian. Unfortunately, they do have a right to be concerned. As you said, Joe Biden had a wide open border policy for 4 years. We know that terrorists tried to enter our country. Iran has a long history of terrorizing America going back 46 years, to include here in the United States. They tried to assassinate Donald Trump last year. Someone finally answered the call to Iran's fatwa against Salman Rushdie a few years back and brutally stabbed him. But I think it's important that we remember Iran did not become a terrorist state because Donald Trump bombed their nuclear bunkers.
In 2021, 48 came across, then 197, then 462, and then the last year of Joe Biden, 797. So that's the IED in human beings that the Biden administration left behind. Just moving ahead and talking about what's going to happen next. The foreign minister of Iran is going to Russia today. And ahead of that meeting, the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, says this: the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. That is just off the charts crazy. But how do you view it?
Well, one, he doesn't have real influence inside of Russia. Vladimir Putin does. He was Vladimir Putin's puppet for 4 years when he was president during the Obama era. And two, I think you see that kind of bluster and rhetoric because Iran is providing no real support, or I'm sorry, Russia is providing no real support to Iran. For the second time in just 8 months, one of Iran's main clients in the Middle East has faced dire straits, and Russia has stood by. The first was last fall when Bashar al-Assad's tyranny fell in Syria. What did Russia do? It simply gave Assad a one-way trip to Moscow. Now, Donald Trump, after 25 years of presidents promising that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, has finally acted on it and destroyed their key nuclear facilities and infrastructure. And what has Russia done? Issued a strongly worded statement and welcomed Iran's foreign minister to Moscow. So I think this is mostly just bluster to cover up the fact that Russia is a pretty fickle friend to have in the world.
Senator, people like to label people like you war hawks or neocons. Lindsey Graham, war hawk. Are you a war hawk or a neocon?
No, Brian, I'm someone who puts America's interests first, just like Donald Trump. And for 10 years, like Donald Trump, I have said that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Iran has been terrorizing the United States and the civilized world since 1979. They have the blood of thousands of Americans on their hands. As President Trump has said repeatedly, so have I said, Iran can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That means Iran cannot have any path to nuclear weapons either.
And it's personal to you. You're in the infantry. In Iraq, we've lost 600 plus guys. It's more like over 1,000, according to former Secretary of Defense Austin. And it's directly linked to Iran. And they've never been forced to pay for that. Maybe the payback begins. And I don't think that's being a war hawk. I think it's defending America. Senator Tom Cotton, thanks so much.
America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. That is my total belief. Here we go.
To sit down with his national security team at 1 o'clock Eastern time to discuss the next steps with Iran.
Alexandra Hoff joins us live from the White House with the details. Good morning, Alex.
Well, good morning to you. There are several topics up for discussion today, several fields that they will wish to explore during this meeting, global threats being one of them. We do know now that Americans at the U.S. Embassy in Qatar have been told to shelter in place. This was out of an abundance of caution, so says the embassy, and we're not exactly sure the basis of this warning at this point, but there are global threats. And whether or not they are related to Iran, I mean, that's going to be talked about. Another focus will be clearly the effectiveness of Operation Midnight Hammer. The Pentagon says we aren't going to know the true impact for some time, but the president is defending his use of the word obliteration to describe the 3 nuclear sites. He cited monumental damage as seen by satellite images. And yesterday, Vice President Vance reiterated that it is Iran's nuclear program the U.S. is fighting.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And let me just say, Kristen, that we're incredibly grateful and proud of the American Air Force pilots who did an incredible job last night. It's really an incredible operation, a testament to the power of American military. And I think what shows what can happen when you have that great American military in the hands of capable presidential leadership.
And there are some questions this morning about President Trump's intentions when he wrote this. Quote, it is not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Well, administration officials had said that regime change is not the goal of any of this. The post has been interpreted in various different ways. Some feel it's the president changing his position, not ruling it out. Others are looking at this as if the president is mulling the possibility of the Iranian people sparking change on their own. And tomorrow, the president is headed to the Netherlands for the NATO summit. And while there, a U.S. official tells Fox that he intends to secure a historic 5% defense spending pledge with allies. Timely. Guys.
Okay. I know we'll be covering that. Thank you so much, Alex.
Good news, ladies and gentlemen. Ceasefire is in effect. Okay. It's in effect.
A Fox News alert, President Trump gathering his National Security Council at the White House today as he doubles down on his campaign promise, making the world a safer place after the epic takedown of Iran's major nuclear sites. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt joins us now. Caroline, I know the president seems very pleased by the results so far. What do we know about the effectiveness of the attack that's been relayed to you?
The president is pleased, the country is pleased, and frankly, Brian, the whole world should be pleased with the courageous action that President Trump and our United States military took on Saturday night. I want to thank, and the president wants to thank, the brave pilots who flew nearly 40 hours and more than 7,000 miles from the middle of America to the Middle East to conduct this highly successful and complex precision strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. This is an operation that presidents of the past have dreamed about, but no president had the guts to actually do it. But President Trump did, to take away this imminent threat, not just to the state of Israel, but to the United States and the rest of the world. So the country is a safer place today because of the president's bold action, and he has prevented a nuclear conflict. He has prevented a rogue radical regime from obtaining a nuclear bomb and threatening our people.
So I know the president's very decisive, but he also likes listening to all angles. And he's used to Democrats fighting against him. How much harder was the decision when you have people like Steve Bannon coming over for lunch saying don't do it, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying don't do it, and other voices like that? How did the president digest all that, knowing these people weren't necessarily against him, they're against pending action he more than likely was going to take?
One of the great things that makes President Trump a great leader is his ability to listen to people with different perspectives, but then ultimately make a decision based on his own instinct and the intelligence that he saw. And he saw, based on U.S. intelligence, that Iran is just weeks away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And President Trump has been saying his entire life, not just as a presidential candidate or as president of the United States twice, but also as a private citizen, that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. And that's something that leaders around this world and on both sides of the political aisle agree with. Again, presidents dating back to Democrat Bill Clinton have said that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon, but none of them had the courage to actually do something about it, and President Trump did. And nobody knows what it means to accomplish peace through strength better than President Trump. He is the one who came up with that motto and that foreign policy doctrine, and he successfully implemented it in his first term. And this is one of many steps he is taking to successfully implement peace in his second term. The president wants to see a peaceful and prosperous Middle East. He talked about that extensively when we took that historic trip to Saudi Arabia. And he talked about how the Iranian terrorist regime was bringing down the rest of the region. And our Gulf partners and allies agree with that sentiment. So the president wants peace. Sometimes you have to use strength to achieve it. And he's not afraid to use strength. And as Saturday night proved, the United States has the best and most lethal fighting force in the history of the world, and we can use it if we must.
So the president tweeted out the next day, and I agree with you, by the way, and I think most everyone watching does, says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Does he think we should do that? Is he asking the Iranian people to do that? What's he saying there?
The president believes the Iranian people can control their own destiny. And what he said last night makes complete sense. If the Iranian regime refuses to come to a peaceful diplomatic solution, which the president is still interested in engaging in, by the way, why shouldn't the Iranian people take away the power of this incredibly violent regime that has been suppressing them for decades? And so our posture has not changed. Our military posture has not changed. These were decisive precision strikes that were successful on Saturday evening. But the president is just simply raising a good question that many people around the world are asking.
So let's go to the border, if we can, and how that relates to the reprisals that Iran promises. One of the things they said was, you know, Donald Trump, gambler Donald Trump can start a war, we'll finish it. Well, could it be through a sleeper cell here? Well, they certainly have the numbers. It turns out over the last 4 years, there's been over 1,500 Iranians coming through our southern border, 729 qualified for release. Your reactions to the American people concerned about a possible sleeper cell reprisal here?
Mm-hmm. President Trump has no greater responsibility than protecting the homeland. And look at what he has done over the past several months to do that. He has done more than any president in American history to secure our border and the largest mass deportation operation of illegal criminals, many of them known terrorists that Joe Biden led into this country, are being removed every day. I spoke to our Secretary of Homeland Security this morning. She held a call with governors across the country, and the Department of Homeland Security is actively engaged with our state and local law enforcement partners to protect the American people. That is the president's number one priority in all of this. And that's ultimately what led him to make the decision to launch this strike on Saturday night, to protect our homeland from threats abroad. And we will continue to protect our homeland from threats here at home.
Caroline, but no specific threat yet in any city or any state or any building?
Not that I'm tracking, Brian, but I can assure you the Department of Homeland Security is monitoring this situation very closely.
So as this operation takes place, Democrats said they were not told about it. They were left in the dark, and they said usually there's bipartisan calls for this, and they didn't know about it. Here is Republican Thomas Massie.
We haven't been briefed. They should have called us all back. And frankly, we should have debated this War Powers resolution that Ro Khanna and I offered instead of staying on vacation and doing fundraisers and saying, oh, well, the president's got this under control. We're going to cede our constitutional authority.
Should you have called everybody back?
First of all, we did make bipartisan calls. Thomas Massie and the Democrats, he should be a Democrat because he's more aligned with them than with the Republican Party. We're given notice. The White House made calls to congressional leadership. They were bipartisan calls. In fact, Hakeem Jeffries couldn't be reached. We tried him before the strike and he didn't pick up the phone, but he was briefed after, as well as Chuck Schumer was briefed prior to the strike. So this notion that CNN ran with at the White House did not give a heads up to Democrats is just completely false. In fact, both Senator Schumer's office and CNN had to retract that story last night because it was a blatant lie. And we showed them the timestamps from those phone calls. But I want to add something to Thomas Massie's false point. The White House was not obligated to call anyone because the president was acting within his legal authority under Article 2 of the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief of the President of the United States. We gave these calls as a courtesy, and the Democrats are lying about this because they can't talk about the truth of the success of that operation and the success of our United States military and the success of this president and this administration in doing something that past administrations, Democrats too, have only dreamed about.
Yeah, but President Obama did not ask for permission to bomb Libya in 2011.
That's right.
Finally, I know you guys are going over to NATO. You're going to go one day later. It's going to be on Tuesday. So far, our NATO allies are looking for de-escalation. What do you want to hear from them about what we did over the weekend?
That's right. The president will be taking off for NATO tomorrow morning. And one of the main topics of discussion will be that 5% threshold that our NATO allies have to hit. The president has been calling on our NATO allies to do more for quite some time. He got them to step up and do more in his first term. And you'll hear the president talk about that on this next historic trip to Europe.
You want them spending 5%, right? 5%
right.
of their GDP on defense. Yes. Some of them just got to 2%. Have you gotten any pushback on that?
Not so far, not that we've heard, and the president has been adamant. And our NATO allies, to their credit, heeded the president's strong call in his first term, and we expect them to do it this time around as well.
I know it's one of those very tense times that you're always going to remember. And thanks so much for letting us know what's happening from inside the White House. Karoline Leavitt, thank you.
Shout out to Karoline Leavitt, youngest press secretary ever. She's 27 years old. She's a mother, a wife, and hardworking woman. So I just wanted to put that out there. God bless her, and God bless the President of the United States, and God bless everybody for tuning in. Here we go.
Operation Midnight Hammer was an epic operation that caught Iran completely off guard. As they say, our bomber pilots are now back home in Missouri. And President Trump thanked them in a post last night. For a job well done, exclamation point, all caps. We're learning more about the many levels of deception and decoy. It was like a James Bond movie that went into this mission. The real strike force went east toward the heavily fortified nuclear facility at Fordow. Those B-2 bombers dropped a dozen bunker buster bombs on Fordow alone, each weighing 30,000 pounds, and they never once encountered enemy fire. Chief National Correspondent, Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon. I tell you, you just can't stop being wowed by what we pulled off, Jennifer.
An absolutely flawless mission. But Harris, U.S. military forces are now on high alert across the Middle East, expecting an imminent response from Iran. The U.S. Navy actively planning its response should Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy mine the Strait of Hormuz. Few here at the Pentagon think this is over, despite Saturday's flawless military strike on Iran's 3 nuclear facilities, a plan that has been honed and practiced since 2008. U.S. B-2 pilots have been practicing this 37-hour round-trip flight to the Middle East for years. The 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs tested against hardened targets as recently as last year.
This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this.
125 U.S. warplanes, each B-2 refueled in midair 3 to 4 times each way on the nonstop 18-hour flight from Missouri. An air refueling bridge across the Mediterranean and Middle East, 14 GBU-57 bunker buster bombs among the 75 satellite-guided munitions dropped, and 30 Tomahawk missiles fired from an Ohio-class submarine 400 miles away, which stayed in the air 1 hour and 40 minutes, time to drop after the last B-2 struck in Fordow. Captain Todd Sawhill, an intelligence targeting officer focused on this problem for years, was asked whether the Tomahawks could destroy Isfahan and the deep tunnels where the Iranian uranium conversion takes place.
No, in that case, it's extremely limited because those weapons are really designed to go after surface targets. They don't have much penetration capability. The problem is, like you mentioned, the mountain, which is deep under hard granite and unreachable by conventional munitions, to include the GBU-57.
Isfahan is arguably a tougher target, Harris, than Fordow. The U.S. will be using signals intelligence and other means to sniff for nuclear particles at the sites, along with Israeli human intelligence on the ground to give the final bomb damage assessment, Harris.
Yeah, and the world awaits to see what that will hold. Jennifer, we have breaking news right now, and it's partially on what you were talking about. Qatar's foreign minister now has just announced it is shutting down its airspace to all commercial flights indefinitely. And we know just a few minutes ago that the U.S. issued a shelter-in-place order for Americans in Qatar. What does all of this tell you?
Well, there's very significant intelligence and a warning that Iran could strike at any time, an imminent threat to Qatar. Of course, Qatar is where Al Udeid is. That's the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. Normally, there would be 10,000 U.S. troops stationed there. Last week, we reported that most of the aircraft had been moved from Al Udeid. However, those missiles, cruise and ballistic, short and medium range from Iran would take just a few minutes to reach Qatar, and there's also the possibility of swarming drones. So right now, high alert inside Qatar. We've seen the warnings at the U.S. Embassy as well as at other embassies across Qatar.
I'm so glad you're on with us at this moment, because following a U.S. security alert for U.S. nationals in Qatar out of an abundance of caution, we've recommended that British nationals in Qatar also shelter in place until further notice. So this is ramping up, and what we do know is our military is at the ready. They've been pulling into place for a couple of weeks now, even. Jennifer, thank you very much. Always appreciate your reporting. More on the breaking news out of that region. KT McFarland served as Deputy National Security Advisor during President Trump's first administration. So hitting our troops in that region, Iran has done so many times before. Over 200 times under President Biden. It is time we respond. What do you foresee just out of these warnings from Qatar?
Well, Iran's going to retaliate. The question is, how are they going to retaliate and how successful will they be? I mean, the most they could do is to try to take out U.S. forces or attack U.S. forces in the region. But as you pointed out, we're ready for that. We've brought more assets into the region to defend our bases, our people. We've taken civilian dependence out of the region, so to make a smaller target, if you will. And we've also, particularly Israel, has degraded the capability of Iran to have those kind of attacks. So we're ready, but we're expecting to take the blow, but we're ready. I mean, Iran could also go after Israeli facilities in the region or bomb Israel again. But again, their ability to do so has been greatly reduced. We know they're going to do something. The question is what, and would it trigger the response that President Trump has talked about? You know, they've got to all be nervous. I mean, they've shown that Donald Trump has shown that he's not a patsy. He's not going to believe that, oh, well, we feel, you know, we want to negotiate. He's going to do what he has to do to protect Americans.
And what I hear you getting at is they have to be really careful when they make this next move. I mean, it's like walking on toothpicks on top of a lily pad. You can't be too heavy-footed or you'll go into water and you don't know how deep it is. I mean, Trump is willing to do what is necessary, right? I mean, it's just that tricky. I have parents from the South, so I have a lot of those little sayings. But look, what you're saying is they've got to try to hit us, but not hit us too hard. I don't know if they can pull that off. Many of their military commanders were taken out by Israel.
And the ones that remain know that if they, you know, they could be taken out as well. I mean, it's pretty clear that Mossad has thoroughly penetrated the Iranian military, the Iranian civilian leadership. And if they try to do something that would, especially something that would cause loss of American life, you know, they might as well pull the trigger on their own heads. What President Trump was interesting when he's talked about regime change. Now, regime change in the George W. Bush, Barack Obama sense is American Marines go in, we get rid of the guy, we put our own government in, we try to figure out how they should become a modern American democracy. And it's never worked. It didn't work in Afghanistan, didn't work in Iraq, didn't work in Libya. President Trump has said to the Iranian people, look, you should have leaders who make your country great again. It's up to you. And he said consistently throughout his 2 terms that it's up to the people to decide their own country. You know, you decide what kind of a government you want, what leaders you want, how you worship your God. It's up to you. If you want to do regime change, that's on you, but we might applaud it if you do this in the case of Iran.
So a few minutes ago, when Ambassador Danon was here, he was telling me, and it seems like a point of desperation, we were both agreeing off camera, and then the conversation ensued. He said that they are hiring prisoners coming out of jails in Israel. Iran is doing this, trying to find the angriest among them to see if they can flip them as assets and give them menial tasks, he said. They'll send them, you know, take a picture over here, you get a little bit of change for that, until they work them up into doing something worse.
You know, that's an act of desperation, right? I mean, the Ayatollah we know is in hiding. He already has decided he's going to be a martyr. He's 86 years old. He's dying of cancer. What a great way to go out. He's already designated 3 people who would be his successors. But you have to wonder what's the conversations they're having within the leadership group of Iran. Because of the generals looking at each other and say, I've had this job for 48 hours now. My predecessor was assassinated. I want to keep this job. Did I sign up for this? Did I sign up for martyrdom? And maybe, as President Trump says, the Iranian people want to make Iran great again. President Trump's offering an opportunity to come to the negotiating table and extend the hand of freedom and peace.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Iran looks for enemies within the countries that it would like to have death of.
Yeah.
KT McFarland, great to have you. Thank you so much.
Remember, liberals and some conservatives were like, this would go on for years and years. But unfortunately for them, the commander-in-chief, who happens to be someone who is smart, has decided to bring everybody together. And it's a ceasefire, ladies and gentlemen. Ceasefire. All right, here we go. Of course, Qatar face.
Less than an hour from now, President Trump expected to meet with his national security team inside of the White House. That as we learn of new warnings from U.S. sources to Fox of an imminent Iranian strike on a U.S. base in Qatar. In fact, it was the very same base that President Trump spoke at during his trip to the Middle East. Now, this is where the United States has its largest air base in the Middle East. And Qatar has closed its airspace until further notice. You can look at the flight radar. There are literally no flights above Qatar right now. And the State Department is instructing all Americans to shelter in place. We are learning more about America's historic strike against Iran in the meantime. And new details are emerging about this weekend, how the U.S. carried out a highly precise airstrike mission that successfully took out 3 of Iran's most important nuclear sites. You've heard them by name: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. And now President Trump is calling for peace.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
The president hailing the mission on Truth Social, writing, quote, "Monumental damage was done to all nuclear sites in Iran, as shown by satellite images. Obliteration is an accurate term." And the Pentagon revealing just how unprecedented the mission actually was.
The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time.
This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military.
This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-host Emily Compagno and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Tudor Dixon, former GOP gubernatorial candidate and host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, and Brian Kilmeade, Fox & Friends co-host, host of the Brian Kilmeade radio show, and host of One Nation with Brian Kilmeade. Well, first, let's go to Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who joins us live from the Pentagon. Jennifer.
Kayleigh, significant intelligence warnings focused on Qatar right now, where the U.S. has its largest air base in the Middle East. Concerns that Iran will fire short or medium-range cruise and ballistic missiles or swarming drones at the U.S. base at Al Udeid. Satellite images show that the U.S. moved most of their unhangared aircraft out of Al Udeid last week, but still this could be a tempting target for Iranian retaliation. Embassies across Doha, the capital, have ordered their workers and their employees evacuated, and for those who remain to shelter in place, the threat appears to be imminent. From a technical standpoint, the military part of this operation on Saturday went flawlessly. 7 B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and traveled east, while another 2 traveled west over the Pacific, serving as a decoy. The B-2s can be seen on takeoff and landing, but were so stealth, the Iranian air defenses never saw them. 125 U.S. warplanes were involved in the strike, including F-22 and F-35 escorts, 75 precision-guided weapons fired by the U.S. at Iran's 3 nuclear sites.
The 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats.
The B-2s took off from Missouri at 12:01 a.m. Saturday morning. 18 hours later, 12 massive Ordnance Penetrator bunker buster bombs dropped by 6 B-2 bombers on the main enrichment site in Fordow. A 7th B-2 bomber dropped 2 30,000-pound bombs on the underground uranium enrichment site at Natanz. Lastly, 30 Tomahawk missiles fired from an Ohio-class submarine 400 miles away landed at Isfahan. It is much too early to say what the bomb damage assessment at Isfahan, with its hardened tunnels some 600 feet deep, really were. Current and former Pentagon officials think the program was likely set back by 1 to 2 years, but no one knows where the highly enriched uranium actually is. 900 pounds of it, enough for 9 nuclear bombs. It could have been moved or could be buried, we're told. There is little doubt that the U.S. will now face a retaliatory strike from Iran. After the U.S. military killed General Qasem Soleimani in 2020, it took Iran 10 days to fire ballistic missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq. But this time it may come a lot sooner. Kayleigh?
Jen, quick question for you, because I'm reading reports about the airspace being closed above Al Udeid Air Base there. Was there any effort to disperse troops ahead of this moment? Because 10,000 U.S. troops is a highly concentrated number of U.S. troops in one place.
We don't have any details, but I can assure you that troops and embassy personnel have been dispersed, and the family members of those troops and embassy members were sent home in the last week. Also, we can report that many of those, we had satellite imagery showing that many of the planes that were at Al Udeid, the U.S. warplanes, they had been moved. You couldn't see them on the tarmac last week, but still a very tempting target, symbolically and otherwise, for the Iranians, and certainly closing the airspace over Qatar. It's clear that other embassies, as well as the Qatar itself, has this same intelligence.
Thank you, Jennifer. You know, Harris, this has happened rapidly. We saw the UK make moves in the US, and now you can look at some of the satellite imagery and you do not see planes over Qatar.
Yeah, I mean, what really flagged me was the shelter in place. So that happened much earlier today. And then you saw the UK get involved in that as well, telling its citizens as well. And that's always a sign that if you didn't get out, and we've heard President Trump in the last few days saying, get on something flying. You know, if you're in that region, and particularly on the ground in Israel, anywhere near there. So many people have taken it up to, and then they've got land bridges going to some of our friends and allies, as well as much as we can lean on them at this point. I mean, Jordan put out a pretty interesting statement that didn't support us, but maybe they just say that publicly, we hope. But in this instance, what's key here is Iran has hit us so many times as military bases around the region. 200 plus times in Biden's presidency, and he did nothing. So they think they've got a bird in the hand by hitting our military people. And as KT McFarland said, and as generals have said on this very air, they need to rethink that after Operation Midnight Hammer.
Yeah, and we know more than 600 troops killed in Iraq at the hands of Iran and their proxies. Brian, you know, the Biden presidency was mentioned, and I do want to put the action President Trump took in historical context. I want to take us back to the late 1990s and show you what Democratic presidents have promised and what President Trump actually did. You can see this here. Clinton, as all of you know, Iran needs to meet its energy needs, and then he goes on to say Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Obama, I've stated Iran will never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. Biden, we will not, let me say it again, not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. President Trump, the first president who was actually able to stand in front of a camera and say Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. The first three have one thing in common, words. The fourth one has an action.
Yeah, it's such a joke when you see Democrats go, you know, this is a war of choice. We'd have to do that. It's not a threat to us. This is Israel's problem. Since when is it Israel's problem? The other thing is, if they go ahead and hit us in Qatar, keep in mind, there's going to be an immediate response. It's going to be coming right away. We told them in no uncertain terms, if you hit us back, this is it. You hit us back, we're going to wipe out your oil, going to wipe out your gas. Try to get an economy going in Iran if you have neither one of those energy sources. Also, Israel has picked up the pace. They are bombing out paramilitary sites. Right. There are different places, government buildings in Tehran. They also have bombed out the front of Evin prison, where a lot of political prisoners are being held. So believe me, this is not going away. They have lost their command and control. Most of the nuclear scientists. They have an 86-year-old leader hanging out in a bunker somewhere. They should realize, if I could take the president's term, they got very few cards.
Yeah, they do. You know, you have the extraordinary actions of President Trump and the extraordinary actions of our military. Tudor, I want to play this for you. I want to take us back to 2013 to President Obama and the time he mentioned Fordo. Listen to this.
They don't need to have a underground fortified facility like Fordo in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. They certainly don't need a heavy water reactor at Iraq in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. They don't need some of the advanced centrifuges that they currently possess in order to have a limited, peaceful nuclear program.
They didn't need that, but they built Fordo underground, and so it didn't appear that those words worked.
No, and I think that's what all rational military generals have come out and said. Like, we are watching what they're doing. We see that instead of having 3 to 5% uranium enrichment in Iran, they have 60%. We know what that means. That means they are going toward nuclear weapons. This is also a country that has said death to Israel, death to America, time and time again. Barack Obama knew it was dangerous. He wasn't willing to do anything about it because he was scared. Donald Trump has proven nothing. He is afraid of nothing, and he is willing to protect America
over anything else. Yeah, that's right. You know, Emily, I want to focus for a second, and I know you'll do just such a great job at this, on our military. The extraordinary work that they did, the second longest B-2 mission ever to be flown, second only to 9/11, refueling multiple times in air, a stealth mission with diversions. I mean, this shows how extraordinary the U.S. armed forces are, how elite, how incredible in every sense of the word.
I think it can never be overstated the intensity and the elite caliber of the collaboration and the constellation of perfection required to pull this operation off. And oftentimes when we see a main character who makes it look effortless, we think that they're operating solo. And the reality here is those beautiful B-2 bombers had a support squad, the superheroes of the century. And we heard about the third and fourth gen fighter pilots or fighter jets. So those are the F-22s, the F-35s. These are of history, and the support required, you know, keep in mind, of course, obviously the B-2, its strength is in its stealth, but certainly not in its self-defense maneuverability, agility, or ability to withstand attacks midair. So that's what the squad is for. And when you introduce as well the submarine, right, that shot the Tomahawks over, and you introduce the precision required of the timeliness, of the silence required, I mean, it's an extraordinary feat. And may I just say, as you referenced prior president's comments, the actions here of this president, in the words of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, who said that this president met the moment. I note Jamie Metzel, who was Biden's deputy staff director of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He served on the National Security Council under President Clinton. And he had a lengthy post on Saturday where he said, look, I believe electing Kamala Harris would have been better for our country, goes on. But he said, I also believe Vice President Harris would not have had the courage or fortitude to take such an essential step as the president took last night. That's
Kamala Harris, ladies and gentlemen. There is absolutely no way Kamala Harris would have been able to do what Trump did on Saturday. Impossible. Matter of fact, she will be sending Iran billions of dollars, just like, you know, Joe Biden. But look, it is what it is.
I'm looking now, major cases of GPS jamming in Qatar and other Gulf states. Iran is bombing Qatar. Let's bring in now Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. You and I started talking about this about more than an hour ago now. Are we where your sources are telling you that we thought we'd be? Have we gone someplace that we're at least prepared to deal with?
Well, Harris, right now, what we can tell from open source reporting on Twitter, you can see imagery of about what we're told from Israeli sources are 6 ballistic missiles that have been fired from Iran towards Qatar. As you know, as we discussed, the Al Udeid base, the largest U.S. Base in the Middle East, is about 40 miles from the capital of Qatar, from Doha. You can see the night skies over Doha right now, and there are explosions in the air. Some of those may be air defense missiles, Patriot missiles, trying to intercept those ballistic missiles. We have no indications of impact at this point. As you and I discussed before, there were satellite images from last week of Al Udeid, where the U.S. normally has a large number of transport planes, refueling planes, that those tarmacs had been emptied of those warplanes. But Al Udeid normally would have 10,000 U.S. troops based there. There had been warnings to U.S. embassy staff to shelter in place and at other embassies across Doha. We also now are learning that the airspace over UAE, the United Arab Emirates, where the United States military has another large military base, that airspace has been closed. And we also understand there could be an imminent threat to U.S. troops and personnel at bases in Iraq. That, if you remember, just 5 years ago, Iran fired ballistic missiles, dozens of them, at U.S. troops in the wake of Qasem Soleimani's killing. So a lot of intelligence warnings. We brought it to you on air just a little while ago, and now it seems that those explosions are being heard over the capital of Qatar.
Well, and through your reporting, you readied us for, exactly who would be still there, and you're furthering that now to let us know who is able to get out and who's expected to be there serving right now. 6 missiles may not sound a lot to some people because they can do so much damage. And Iran reportedly has been running low on, we don't really exactly know what they have. Maybe they're not running that low. But with precision, 6 missiles are a lot. They haven't really been precision.
Okay, look. Let's just go straight to the point. Okay. No one was hurt. There was some sort of explosion in Qatar. Okay. But Iranians actually told the Qatari government that they were going to do what they were going to do to the United States base in Qatar. So technically, that wasn't a retaliation. It's just, you know what? We're going to save face. They were trying to save face, and they did what they were supposed to do, which, it's okay to do what you're supposed to do to save face. But nothing happened. No one was hurt. Okay, no American, I say that again, no American was hurt. And like I said earlier, the Iranians actually notified the Qatari government that, hey, we would do this. So, in essence, the Qatari government told the United States got ready to counter all of those missiles. So, nothing destroyed anything. So, it is what it is. But there's been a ceasefire. I'm just walking us along until we get to the ceasefire. All right, here we go.
Before this attack took place, the Americans understood that Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain could be on the top target list for the Iranians in any sort of response following those strikes that were ordered by President Trump to go after Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. We're working to get some confirmation about reports that American bases in Iraq may have been targeted. But again, the information that we have about the Gulf is significant. There are air defense systems in Qatar, both the THAAD missile defense system and the Patriot system. And according to some initial video that we reviewed from sources in Doha, it looks like, if not all, but the majority of these incoming missiles were shot down overhead. In terms of what led up to this, we know earlier today the U.S. Embassy in Doha sent out an alert to American citizens in Qatar to shelter in place. Shortly after that, the airspace over this country was closed. You could see on flight radar maps a number of flights diverting to other regional airports. And again, that condemnation coming in from the Qataris. We're also monitoring Iranian state media at this hour, who says that they launched this attack, calling it the Annunciation of Victory. Iranian state media also saying their military says this was a devastating and powerful attack. This is not unexpected propaganda to receive from the regime in Tehran, but again, an indication that the Iranians are looking to save face following this U.S. strike that went after their nuclear facilities over the weekend. Other regional countries, including Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE, do remain on high alert at this hour over concern that there could be further attacks on U.S. interests in the region. Of course, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. There are also thousands of American forces in Kuwait, and then the possibility that Iraq could be targeted as well. I can take you back to 2020 when the Americans ordered that drone strike against Qasem Soleimani outside of Baghdad's international airport. The Iranians responded then with 13 ballistic missiles against the Ain al-Assad air base in western Iraq. And so, of course, missile defense systems across the region remain on high alert. Again, the Americans knew this was a possibility and largely evacuated much of their personnel from these areas. John, Sandra?
All right, just going through the Qatar response here. Qatar saying it reserves the right to respond after this Iranian attack. As John just reported, Qatar is saying no casualties from that attack at the U.S. military base. Thank goodness. And the top security body there, Iran's top security body there, is saying the armed forces used the same number of bombs that the U.S. had used in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. That is per the latest statement that we've been digesting, Trey. Please do weigh in on that. As John and I were just discussing, is what we're seeing is this evidence of diminished capabilities on the part of Iran?
Look, the types of missiles that the Iranians are likely using against American interests in Qatar, as Jennifer noted, are some from their shorter range arsenal. Cruise missiles or possibly medium-range ballistic missiles, but not the same missiles that they were using over the past 11 days to target major Israeli population centers. A Qatari source just sending me another statement that I do want to just read here live. From a spokesman for Qatar's foreign minister saying, we reaffirm that dialogue is the only way to overcome the current crisis and ensure the security in the region and the peace of its people remains. And so the Qataris still, amid all of this, encouraging diplomacy and dialogue in the region. They have been one of the leaders in the Middle East over the past more than 600 days, trying to de-escalate regional tension, bring all parties to the table, and ultimately find some sort of off-ramp, ceasefire agreements, or at least temporary understandings. But as this war develops between Israel and Iran, there is concern that this could spiral and continue, because we heard from President Trump directly, we heard from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, that any attack on American interests in the region would be met with a response. Everyone from American officials to current and former Israeli officials warned Iran against such an attack taking place. Now, while this is limited in nature, it certainly does bring this entire conflict into a new chapter and raises questions about how the Americans might respond to this direct attack on their largest military base in the Middle East. This is a base that normally houses around 10,000 U.S. personnel. We have reported from the Al Udeid base just outside of Doha. It's about a 30-minute drive from the U.S. Embassy in the Qatari capital. And it's a place where there's a lot of coordination for U.S. Central Command. You might remember back in 2021 when those evacuation flights were taking place. Many of them were landing from Kabul, Afghanistan to Doha, Qatar at this airbase. And so it's a base that was built in the late 90s. It cost around $1 billion to build. And it is still owned by the Qataris, but it is, again, the largest American base in the region. And there is close coordination for U.S. Central Command done out of this base. It was largely evacuated before this took place. And again, according to a spokesman for Qatar's foreign ministry, no one was injured in this.
I mean, just take a look at the polls. We have congratulations, peace, time. And it says two options, okay? Yes, peace through strength, 59%, okay? We have over 1,000 votes. The other answer here is no, I don't think it's peacetime. I don't think it's peacetime. And it's 41% saying they don't think it's peacetime. What are you even doing? What are you guys doing voting for no, I don't think it's peacetime? You don't want peace? What is wrong with everybody? Like, Jesus, dear Lord, God, Jesus, what in the world?
Missile strike launched by Iran. But again, this shows that the Iranians are willing to respond directly to American interests in the region. And even before the war between Israel and Iran erupted 11 days ago, with this Israeli strike starting against the top IRGC officials, Iranian nuclear scientists, and of course, Iran's nuclear program, the United States was preparing for this possibility. You might remember about 2 weeks ago, President Trump ordered a partial evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. There was a voluntary evacuation for the dependents of U.S. Embassy personnel and military spouses and children in places like Bahrain and Kuwait. The United States understood that as a war would develop between Israel and Iran, that U.S. interests in the region could come under attack. And of course, with those U.S. strikes against the Iranian nuclear facilities, those 3 facilities over the weekend, the officials here have been bracing for such a response. Israeli officials, though, remain on high alert, understanding that this is certainly not the end of Iranian response as it relates to Israel. But as for American forces in the region, again, the latest information that we can report attributable to Qatari officials is that there were no injuries in these strikes that took place just earlier this hour. And there is initial reporting coming in right now from the New York Times indicating that Iran coordinated the attacks with the American air base in Qatar, and Qatari officials gave advance notice that the attacks were coming to minimize the casualties. Again, that information attributable to the New York Times, but this is not surprising because they did a very similar coordination back in 2020 in response to the killing of Qasem Soleimani, that drone strike that President Trump ordered. This was meant to contain possible escalation in the region. And so we'll work on matching that reporting from the New York Times, but it would not be surprising that the Iranians wanted to coordinate their response as to not drag more officials and militaries in the region into the current war that is escalating between Israel and Iran. Guys?
You know, as you're on the air, Trey, and you probably can't see it, we're getting some pretty spectacular footage of the missile intercepts there. We don't know if it was all just American Patriot missiles or if there were other anti-missile devices that were sent up into the sky as well, but it's looking very much like Israel did over the last couple of weeks. Apparently, the Iranians have given this a name, Operation Fatah's Blessing, against the American Al Udeid air base in Qatar. This question to you. So we saw the response at the Al-Assad air base, and somewhere up to 17 missiles fell on the Al-Assad air base. The fact that this was very limited, Iran says we matched the number.
Like I mentioned earlier on, the Qatari government was notified, and none of these missiles attack on American base in Qatar was actually devastating. All of these missiles were countered. But the good news is there's been a ceasefire. God is the greatest. I told y'all days ago, actually 12 days ago, when this whole thing started, I said, have a little patience and just support your president, support your commander-in-chief, support your leaders, pray for your leaders. I knew this day was going to come, and now it's here. But unfortunately, we still have left-leaning news channels or whatever, influencers or YouTubers. Oh, I don't know. Look, I just don't get it. Some of these people are still saying there's no way there's going to be peace. What do you actually want? Do you want peace, or you actually like the fact that the chaos gives you stuff to talk about? I don't get it. Here we go. The good news. Okay, the good news.
With Iran in the Middle East, and some breaking news coming just now. Joining us this evening, Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just seconds ago, the president went to Truth Social and typed this. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean? How did it come about? What's the development here?
Well, we were actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here. So that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line. I think what it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. We are now in a place where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
I want to get to the obliterated part in just a minute, but I just want to read this fully so I get the context here. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point, the ceasefire for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years.
All right. Here we go. Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke says Jesus and his Father are one. Jesus only did what he saw his Father do. Jesus only said the things he heard his Father speak. Genesis, someone in chat was asking. God bless. Well, the GOAT, Dr. Luke, just answered the question. So everybody who has a question about what Dr. Luke just said. He just gave the answer. Jesus and his Father are one, okay? And Jesus only did what he saw his Father do. Jesus only said the things he heard his Father speak. And Jesus is King. All right, so here we go.
And destroyed the entire Middle East, but it did.
Shout out to the GOAT. Shout out to the GOAT. Thank you, Dr. Luke. God bless you.
And never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. And God bless the world. He seems confident that this is all coming together.
That's right.
And when you left the White House, were you thinking this was all gelling here?
When I left the White House, I thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line before this broadcast, and it looks like the president has been able to do that. I mean, look, he's been working the phones constantly. Frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days, the president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon. We, of course, destroyed the nuclear program that they had, and the president told the entire team, we're going to work to make sure that they don't try to rebuild that nuclear capability in the future. And it's, look, this is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really hit the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Would you be surprised if Iran is sending out signals that it doesn't have a specific ceasefire plan? How would the communication have been with the Iranians to get this level of confidence to put out that detailed statement?
Well, one of the things I've learned, Brett, about the Iranians in the past, 4 or 5 months that I've been in this job is what they say publicly and privately can sometimes be very different. I think what the Iranians have shown very clearly is they don't want this war to go on for much longer. Their air defenses have been totally destroyed. Their conventional missile program has been largely destroyed. And of course, their nuclear program has been obliterated, as I said before. So I think the Iranians are at a place where they don't want to keep on fighting. You saw the president, and I don't have the truth in front of me, but he talked about the next 6 hours finalizing the attacks. I mean, I think what he's talking about is right now, for the American people watching, it's dark over there. That's typically when the Israelis and the Iranians have been shooting at each other. I think there's some recognition that that might continue for another few hours, and tomorrow really is a new day. The end of the 12-day war, the end of the Iranian nuclear program, and I really do believe the beginning of something very big for peace in the Middle East.
So you said totally obliterated.
Every single American should be happy and should be saying positive things about this. This is a win for American people as well as American military. We do not want to put any boots on ground because everybody was saying this would be another start of a war that would last for 20 years. But the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, that I said a couple of days ago, even yesterday, that we should pray for, that God put him there for a reason. And a lot of people were like, well, he's sending us to war. I'm like, just relax. Stop putting fear in people's heart. And here we go. There's a ceasefire deal, an agreement between Israel and Iran. Just the fact that there is a ceasefire agreement, we should talk about that rather than saying that, well, Iran hasn't said anything about that. Well, Bibi Netanyahu hasn't said anything about that. What does that have to do with what the commander-in-chief just said? Can we just be positive? Why do we have to find the negative in every positive situation? It's like, God, why do you have to be a pessimist? Why can't you just be an optimist? America is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and you have the greatest president in the world that everybody's looking up to make very hard decisions. And now he announced there's a ceasefire deal. Yet we have Americans that are saying, well, Iran hasn't said anything. What are you saying? What are you doing, bro?
The president has said totally obliterated the Iran nuclear program.
Yeah.
Do you know for sure where all the highly enriched uranium is?
Well, Brett, I think that's actually not the question before us. The question before us is, can Iran enrich the uranium to a weapons grade level, and can they convert that fuel to a nuclear weapon? And we know, based on the success of our mission, of course, the leadership of the president, but the incredible skill of our military, that the two mission objectives are completely successful. We know that they cannot build a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked about the highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, like 900 pounds of it.
But what we know, Brett, is that uranium is something that exists in very large supply. Our goal was to bury the uranium, and I do think the uranium is buried, but our goal was to eliminate the enrichment and eliminate their ability to convert that enriched fuel into a nuclear weapon. I think this is an important point, Brett, because so many of the folks who have focused on the highly enriched uranium,
60%.
The main focus, Brett, has been to destroy their...
The more I hear people talk, the more I hear people's opinion, I realize that maybe some people don't even want peace. Like, it's sad, but as much as we're saying we want peace, that the world deserves peace, it's like some people actually do not want peace. Because if there's peace for the world, they would have nothing to talk about. So they actually like the chaos. They want to keep talking about this chaos. So when the commander-in-chief says, time for peace, it's like, oh no, what are we going to talk about now? Because chaos sells more. Why are we like this? There's so much to celebrate. There's so many good news we could talk about. This is part of the good news, the ceasefire, but yet we change the subject to something bad. Trump can literally find the cure to the worst nightmare disease, and the world will still say, especially some Americans, they'll still say, well, Trump, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Aren't we supposed to be happy that there's a ceasefire between Israel and Iran and pray it is not broken?
Enrichment capacity, because we don't want that 60% uranium to become 90% uranium. That's the real concern, and that's what was so successful about our mission.
So after all this, if the Iranian government survives as is, what's to stop it from rebuilding over time if they in fact moved the 60% highly enriched uranium? That's the concern.
No, the big concern, Brett, and this is again what we destroyed, is their ability to enrich uranium. If they have 60% enriched uranium, but they don't have the ability to enrich it to 90%, and further, they don't have the ability to convert that to a nuclear weapon, that is mission success. That is the obliteration of their nuclear program, which is why the president, I think, rightly is using that term. But here's the question. If Iran is desperate to build a nuclear weapon in the future, then they're going to have to deal with a very, very powerful American military again. Our hope is that the lesson that the Iranians have learned here is, look, we can fly a bunker buster bomb from Missouri to Iran completely undetected without landing once on the ground, and we can destroy whatever nuclear capacity you build up. I think that lesson is what's going to teach them not to rebuild their nuclear capacity.
Yesterday, were you speaking on the president's behalf when you said he was not interested in regime change?
Well, Brett, what I've said is the American military, that is not our mission as regime change. Our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities and the nuclear program of Iran, which we, of course, did. I think what the president's also said is that the Iranian people want to make a decision about regime change. That's between the Iranian people and the regime. Of course, we support freedom fighters all around the world, but our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities, and that's what we did.
So you don't think there's any mixed message when he goes to Truth Social and says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA.
Well, I think what the president is saying very clearly, Brett, is if the Iranian people want to do something about their own leadership, that's up to the Iranian people. What the American national security interest here is very simple. It's to destroy the nuclear program. That's what we've done. And now that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over, we have an opportunity, I think, to restart a real peace process. And Brett, this is not just about two countries, Iran and Israel. All of these Gulf Arab states, they want peace. They want to invest. They want to build artificial intelligence hardware. They want to sort of come into the new economy. And that was impossible when you had Iran that was, as the president said, acting like a bully across the Middle East. We really think that if the Iranians are smart about the path forward, this could be a new dawn of an economic age of prosperity, of course, for our Gulf Arab allies, for us, for the Israelis, for everybody. But it's going to require the Iranians play it smart from here.
The president called it very weak, the Iran missile firing on the U.S. base in Qatar, Al Udeid. Was it a face-saving move? How do you get from that, firing missiles at a U.S. base, to a ceasefire, as he details in this Truth Social?
Well, as the president said, they actually gave us some warning here. And we think they gave us some warning because they didn't want to kill Americans and they didn't want to escalate. There's definitely some symbolism to this, Brett. If you look at the Iranian attack, it was 14 missiles that they telegraphed ahead of time. We dropped 14 bunker buster bombs. As the president told me earlier, our missiles, our bombs were a little bit bigger than their bombs. Our bombs actually accomplished the goal of eliminating their nuclear program. But look, we're happy, again, to restart the peace process as the president just did today.
Was the message delivered directly to the U.S. or through an emissary?
The message is always delivered through some sort of intermediary. That's been consistently true of the Iranians. Of course, we'd love to talk to them. The president's been clear about this. We'd love to have a direct conversation about how we move this thing forward because, again, we got to step back here. Why did the president do what he did over the past week? It's so that we could destroy their nuclear program. If they try to rebuild it, they're going to be on the wrong end of American power.
I just got to say, look, I got to say this, This is why I voted for President Donald J. Trump. Because a couple of hours ago, everybody was going bonkers, talking about, well, everybody get ready. Everybody get ready. It's about to be a bloodbath. And now he's completely changed everything. Now we're talking about a ceasefire. How did we go from, oh, everybody get ready to, oh, ceasefire? This is what a leader does. Look, I would vote for Trump over and over and over and over and over again. Call me whatever you want to call me. Call me names. Look, I don't care. This is what I voted for. A strong, capable, reliable commander-in-chief who can actually do the hard things and be smart enough to broker a peace deal. This is what leadership is all about.
Once again, we don't want that. I think they don't want that, but the ball's in their hands.
You've been reluctant or at least cautious about getting engaged previously, and that has been public. What made you sign on to this action this time?
Well, I think the president has been very clear, and I've always agreed with the president that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. And you try to run the diplomatic process as much as you possibly can. When the president decided that wasn't going to work, he took the action that he had to take. Now we're in a new phase. That action was successful. We had a wildly successful military operation to take out their nuclear program. Now let's go on to the next phase. And I think the president, look, sometimes he's willing to use peace. Sometimes he's willing to use the military. I think it really depends on what the Iranians do from here.
And what do you think they do from here?
Well, it's an open question, Brett. I don't want to predict what the other side will do, but I think that I know what we'll do if they continue to pursue a nuclear weapon. And I hope they don't choose that path because I know the president wants to see the Middle East become peaceful and prosperous in the future. That's not going to happen if Iran pursues a nuclear weapon again.
And for the people, so we talked about the people who believe that this is going towards World War III, especially in your own party. There's a section that's very vocal. There's another section that says you should take out this regime because it's evil and horrible and has done horrible things for decades. How do you square those two sides? And can this regime stay in place and still have a peaceful, reaction relationship with the U.S.?
Well, I think the president has squared those two sides quite well. One, because he's the leader of the movement, and a lot of people trust the president.
Shout out to the GOAT. Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. God bless you. He says, "Damns, the hostile mainstream media is a discredited source. Don't be lazy. Find a second and third opinion, then weigh the matter. God bless." Absolutely. Like, I was watching MSNBC. Well, I just stumbled upon it because there's no way I'm watching MSNBC. Okay. There's no way. Too negative. There's no reason to be that negative, Americans. You cannot live your life in fear and in so much negative vibe. You're going to get older fast. Too much wrinkle. Can you just chill, relax? How can the president of the United States say something and you say, no, it's not true, and you go listen to MSNBC? He just told you. There's this. Look, shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. God bless you.
As they should. They recognize they're not seeing the same intelligence. They're not seeing the same classified documents. They trust the president to do a good job. But importantly, Brett, I think he's threaded the needle quite well here. We had a very particular objective. It was profound and difficult to accomplish.
Do you think
the elimination of the Iranian nuclear program.
Do you think they were close?
And I think the president successfully did that. You're asking, were the Iranians close to a nuclear weapon? Brett, they were very close to a nuclear weapon. And what I'd encourage my fellow Americans to think about here is that a week ago, the Iranians were quite close to achieving a nuclear weapon. Now they cannot build a nuclear weapon. That is the biggest testament to the president's leadership and to the success of our mission. In 1 week, without, thank God so far, not losing a single American casualty, we have taken what was a threatening nuclear program that could have destabilized the entire world. Now that program is gone. We did it through effective presidential leadership and also some very, very competent work from our troops.
How often does it happen where you're going to do an interview and you get a Truth Social seconds before? You have some sense of it, but it's pretty detailed, where you are being asked about something the president has just put out.
In this administration, Brett, it happens quite a bit, actually, but we knew this was coming. The draft, it was interesting. I just read the draft about 2 minutes before we went on the air. It was a little bit different from what the president had showed me a couple of hours ago. But again, I knew that he was working the phones as I was on the way over here. So I knew exactly what we were going to do. And look, I love that about this presidency and this administration, is he's always working. He doesn't say, you know, the vice president's going to do an interview, so I'm going to stop doing anything. He says, you know, we're going to do the American people's business. The vice president knows what I'm trying to accomplish. And if I get it done, great, because we're going to talk about it and celebrate it, because it is a thing to celebrate. I can't emphasize this enough, Brett. We have destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. 0 Americans have died. That's an amazing, amazing thing. Americans, whether Democrats or Republicans, we should be celebrating that.
Mr. Vice President, we appreciate you coming and rolling with the punches as well.
Of course.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Brett. Good to see you.
And this is what America stands for. Peace around the world, but most importantly, America first. Here we go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ingram Angle. I'm Laura Ingram, my angle in moments. But first, tonight, we begin with major breaking news. It's a development that few thought was possible even a few days ago. But with President Trump in charge, we've seen time and time again, the so-called experts are proven wrong. President Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a full ceasefire, taking effect in just a few hours. In a Truth Social post in the last hour, the president wrote, "Congratulations to everyone. There will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran would have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions. For 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended." On that assumption that everything works out as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. Here with me now is Bret Baier, chief political anchor and special report anchor, executive editor there as well. Bret, you were on the air. We were all watching with Vice President Vance when Trump's Truth Social post landed. So that was in and of itself kind of hilarious. But do we have details about how this all came together in the last hour?
Well, Laura, good evening. It really was something. Let me just give you the behind the scenes. Trey Yingst was in the middle of wrapping up his report from Tel Aviv, and the producer got in my ear saying, Trump Truth Social coming in the email right now. And I looked down, the vice president's right here on set with me. And as I look down to read it, his staff comes in with an iPhone so he can read the Truth Social as it's coming in. And Trey Yingst wraps up his live report. I thank him. I introduce the vice president and obviously start with what we just heard and saw. And he said he had heard about it, talked about it, hadn't seen the final version, and that's what he was reacting to. Since then, we've learned that Qatar was the intermediary and that Iran officials are now saying they did, in fact, authorize Qatar to negotiate on their behalf, at least according to Reuters and other wire services, and that the Israelis are going to agree to this in a 6-hour time frame. Now, what happens between now and the 6 hours? I expect a lot of kinetic action inside Iran from the Israelis, but that's what it looks like. And then the details that the president laid out about how it follows over the next 24, 48 hours, we don't know what that picture looks like or whether it leads to negotiations.
Well, what was stunning is that just in the last several hours, the supreme leader put out a statement saying, we will not submit. We will never submit. So something was changing in that interim time period, and I guess he was made an offer he couldn't refuse.
Maybe so. We don't know. The supreme leader is supposed to be holed up in a bunker. That the going thing in Iran, we're told, is that everyone doesn't know where he is except the Israelis and the U.S. And they have said that they could take him out at any time. I don't know what has transpired that changed the Iranians' bold action, other than to read the tea leaves here. They gave a pre-warning about the missile strike on Qatar and Al Udeid Air Base, saying this is going to happen, get your people out of there. And then the air defenses took down those missiles, including one from Qatar. And, you know, I think that the president's very weak response post and let's get to peace started phone calls between all of the parties, according to the vice president. And in between the time he left the White House and the time he arrived on this set, something had transpired to get that Truth Social post.
And the president even thanked Iran for the heads up, as you noted with Vance, which it all seemed like it was missile theater at some point. They gave them a chance to save face, shoot up a couple of, what looked like Roman candles. I mean, they were missiles, but and no damage was done, as far as we understand, on the ground. So you wonder why they even went through that exercise. But nevertheless, the president didn't choose to humiliate Iran in this moment, which I think that's classic Trump. He wants to give people a way out.
He did say, let's get to peace, let's get to the table. He called it very weak and thanked them for the heads up. But, it follows a pattern. In 2020, the Iranians did the same thing. They fired on a U.S. military base in Iraq, but they also gave a heads up ahead of time. That was after the Soleimani assassination, the takedown of the main military commander for Iran by the U.S. And so it follows a pattern. We'll see if this also follows a ceasefire, because, as you know, the Israelis feel like they have a lot of superiority in the skies and they can take out targets at will. And they're on the cusp of making a big change to their existential threat. So it may be tough for them to agree to it, but I think the president is pushing.
And Brett, although people don't want to be political in this moment, politics always enters the equation. We had an enormous amount of kind of nastiness across the political aisle over the last few days regarding the president's decision. So some Democrats were more, tepid about it, but others were basically very, very negative on what the president was doing. How do you see this moment playing out politically?
I mean, John Fetterman was the only Democrat I saw very vocal in his support of the action. Others were either tepid or saying it was unconstitutional and he had to come to Congress first. I think a lot of those Democrats, if you look back at President Obama's actions in Lebanon, in Syria, they were not anywhere near as vocal about the congressional authorization issue back then. Politically, I think it plays pretty well. He's kept his party largely together. There are some vocal voices, as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, Tom Massey, but fairly small in number and in voice. And I think it really depends how the ceasefire works out and what comes next.
Brett, thank you very much.
I told you guys that this is what is going to happen, that the United States will broker a peace deal, but a lot of people didn't believe this was going to happen, but it's happened. And unfortunately, some people do not actually want this peace deal. It's just crazy to actually think about, but some people don't want peace. But you have no choice. Enjoy the peace. Okay, enjoy your peace, dude. All right, Jesse Walter.
Fox News alert. Trump says Iran and Israel have just agreed to a ceasefire, and he expects it to last forever. But it won't go into effect for 24 hours. He's going to let them each take one last shot at each other. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. J.D. Vance was just on with Brett.
This is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really hit the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Reuters is also reporting that Iran has officially agreed to the terms of the ceasefire deal, just hours after they fired missiles at American military bases in Qatar and Iraq. Here's the launch. Watch. The president confirmed 14 Iranian rockets were fired, saying 13 were knocked down and one was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. 47 also confirming there were no casualties and hardly any damage was done. Trump calls it a very weak response, but most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system. And there will be, hopefully, no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Trump got a heads up about the Iranian attack because the Iranians didn't want American casualties. Our response would have been devastating. But the regime also had to do something to save face, especially so they can show the Iranian people that they're still in charge. So far, the mission's been flawless. No American casualties. The bombs hit their targets. No real escalation.
The fact that there was 0 American casualty, that right there is a testimony. That right there is a fact. That right there is why Trump is a magnificent leader. Remember what happened during the Afghanistan pullout or withdrawal? Remember when Biden was trying to get Americans out of Afghanistan? You saw what happened? Bunch of BS. This is how a real leader does his duty. You protect your people. When he says America first, everybody's going, well, what do you mean America first? You're sending Americans to war. No, zero casualty, ladies and gentlemen. Just see, it's okay to throw in the towel and bow down to greatness. Oh, look, it's okay. It's okay, ladies and gentlemen. All right, here we go. Shout out to the GOAT. The GOAT says, Dems got to stop talking. Dems got to stop talking in headlines. No one watches your favorite media. We watch channels. Watch CNN. We watch channels. Watch CNN, etc. Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. No one watches your favorite media, which is the Dems, the leftists, MSNBC. It's like they like chaos. Now that it's peace, it's like, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do now? We have to cause uproar. We have to cause some sort of chaos. If everything is so positive and colorful and joyful, they don't like it. No, they don't.
So far, and no mission creep yet. Trump gave the Iranians a deadline and he gave peace a chance. But the president felt like the Ayatollah gave him the middle finger, figuratively, when he refused to meet him in Turkey for face-to-face talks. And that came with a price. When the clock struck midnight Friday, B-2 bombers took off on a 37-hour flight, but they were prepared. These stealth bombers have bathrooms, mini fridges, and microwaves.
These guys flew from Missouri. They didn't land a single time. They dropped 30,000-pound bombs on a target the size of a washing machine and then got back home safely without ever landing in the Middle East or ever stopping other than to briefly refuel. And of course, they did that in the air. So it's really an incredible operation, a testament to the power of American military.
Operation Midnight Hammer has been in the works. Last week, Netanyahu asked the White House, how can we help? Trump said, clear the way for our bombers. The Israeli Air Force had a mission, eliminate as many Iranian air defense systems as possible. The Pentagon handed them a target list, and they went to work. The Iranians had no idea what was coming.
There was nobody speaking about this, any of the preparations. There was a complete lockdown, almost a blackout of information for the last few days. That is a significant achievement because there were no leaks about the timing. If you looked at the moon schedule, you might have had a clue because it was a waning crescent and almost a new moon on the 25th. So it would have been very, very dark over Iran tonight.
Trump gave the final order on Marine One. Secretary Hegseth called him when he was leaving Bedminster Saturday and said, the B-2s are about to reach the point of no return. Are we a go? And the president said, it's a go. The administration was confident their intelligence was rock solid.
Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I see that question being asked in the media. That's an irrelevant question. They have everything they need to build a weapon.
That is the key point in U.S. intelligence assessments. You know that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's not.
The political decision had not been made.
I know that better than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons. Why would you bury things in a mountain, 300 feet under the ground?
Right.
Why would you bury why do they have 60% enriched uranium? Why do they have a space program? Is Iran going to go to the moon? No.
47 flew back to Washington.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Marco Rubio, ladies and gentlemen. Marco Rubio. Is Iran going to go to the moon? Is Iran going to go to the moon? I don't think so. No. I don't think so. Shout out to the GOAT, Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. God bless you. He says, I wouldn't see any CNN if you and others didn't stream it live. I worded it kind of weird. Sorry. Shout out to Dr. Luke. Shout out to Dr. Luke, the GOAT. You are appreciated. God bless you. You are special. You know that, Dr. Luke. God bless you. And shout out to our moderators, C. Shelley, the Mr. Booski. Who else we got? Did I see Jet? I don't think I saw Jet. Ladies and gentlemen. He always tackles out sometimes. Man, who knows? Here we go.
And oversaw the mission in the Situation Room. The president was joined by his national security team, Hegseth, Rubio, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, and the chairman
Derek, I see you also.
of the Joint Chiefs. Originally, a set of B-2s flew west to Guam as a misdirection. The others continued east, each carrying bunker busters. A nuclear submarine in the Arabian Sea fired first. 24 Tomahawks that took out Iranian defense systems. Then the B-2s, flanked by F-22s, dropped 14 bunker busters onto 3 key targets. The main Iranian nuclear sites, which included the famous Fordow facility buried deep underneath a mountain. The U.S. commanders say all 14 bombs hit their targets, leaving nothing but smoking craters. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Raisin Kane, said the targets sustained severe damage and destruction. Trump said they were obliterated and were awaiting additional damage assessment. As the bombers left Iranian airspace, U.S. Navy assets fired Tomahawks to suppress anti-aircraft fire. All the pilots landed safely back in Missouri on Sunday night. The president came out at 10 o'clock Saturday and called it a success.
Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes.
The ceasefire announcement is a strong signal that the short war is winding down. Now, we still have to wait and see what happens next. Iran's nuclear program has been set back years, possibly decades. Their top scientists and generals are all assassinated. Their leaders hiding in a bunker. And they're all alone in the world without proxies or allies. It could be too expensive for the Iranians to reconstitute their nuclear program. We don't know if they have other clandestine sites or whether they snuck enriched uranium out of the mountain before the attack. But there's no doubt the regime's been significantly crippled. The Trump administration appears to have pulled off an incredible operation. And the American military, who lost a little prestige under President Biden, is back in a big way. American deterrence is back. This sends a powerful message to China, Russia, and the cartels, and gives Trump even more power over trade negotiations. Other countries see that Trump is willing to go to the extreme for what he believes. The market's up and oil prices are down. We hope any future fallout can be contained and that American armed forces remain safe and the homeland is protected.
This is how you project positive energy. Listen to how Jesse worded every single sentence he just said. He uplifted the United States. He uplifted the commander-in-chief. Just a very serene vibe. Why can't we just be like that? Why can't all of these folks just be like that? Talk positive talks about the United States. Why do you always talk down about the United States? And this is for everybody, okay? Liberals, conservatives, it doesn't matter. Democrat, Republican, it does not matter. You cannot afford to put your party before the country. You are American first before you are a Democrat, before you are a Republican, okay? We are Americans first. First, ladies and gentlemen, support America. You don't have to say, you know what, well, I'm Democrat. Okay, I get it. But you are American. Can you support your country? Can you try that for a change? Here we go.
Just 12 days, President Trump, in coordination with Israel and our Arab partners, he has totally reshaped the future of the Middle East and the world. The naysayers.
All right, here we go. Shout out to the GOAT one more time. Well, the GOAT, look, the GOAT strikes every single time. Here we go. He says, I remember Luke Palladino. Well, according to the GOAT, Dr. Luke, he says, Luke Palladino wouldn't know the truth even if he was married to it. Welcome back, Palladino. Here we go.
The isolationists were dead wrong. World War III is not happening. Instead, President Trump, he stood up to the worst bully terrorist nation in the entire world and on the planet, and now peace is possible tonight. Thankfully, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been totally defanged. Their nuclear program has been obliterated. Their scientists are dead. Their top generals, many of them, are dead. Most of their missile systems have been destroyed. Their proxies are in tatters, and the so-called elite Revolutionary Guard, they have been ripped to shreds, with more top generals being killed by the Israelis. And after all of that, Iran is all of a sudden now ready to come to the table because they have no leverage at all whatsoever. This is what peace through strength, the Trump doctrine, actually looks like. Can this be a lasting peace? I can't give you that answer tonight. Only time will tell. Now, of course, it is possible, as the Iranian regime, they may simply be trying to buy time so they can rearm. The devil will be in the details of a final deal, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and our Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff, they are now in the process of hammering these issues out. Any deal obviously would insist on any place, anywhere, anytime inspections. The Iranians need to stop providing money and weaponry to all of their proxies. That means Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad. That would be the militias in Syria, the militia in Iraq, and that would be the Houthi rebels. And frankly, they should recognize Israel's right to exist once and for all if we want a real and lasting peace. Or we will have to assume they simply want to build out a bigger, more lethal ballistic missile system. Remember, they have ballistic missiles now with 2,000 pounds. They're looking and aiming to go to 4,000 pounds, and they are firing those missiles into heavily populated areas. The fact that we can even discuss this tonight is only because of President Donald J. Trump. This is what Obama and Biden could and never would do with their policies of appeasement. Remember, that included bribing the Iranians with billions of dollars in cash and other currency being flown into Iran for the mullahs of Iran in cargo planes. And in the case of Joe Biden not enforcing Donald Trump's sanctions that were bankrupting the Republic of Iran, their feckless diplomacy, their appeasement policies allowed the mullahs of Iran to get within weeks of a nuclear weapon. It allowed them to build out their weaponry and foment terror all throughout the region and the world and kill Americans. And, of course, they developed these facilities with all that money deep underground, including the Fordo nuclear site that took years to build deep under this mountain that, of course, is now obliterated. But tonight, one thing is clear to the entire world. The technology, the logistics, the skill of the U.S. military is unmatched. No other country comes close. After decades of being jerked around by and threatened by the Iranians, it took just a mere few hours for the USA to obliterate their nuclear ambitions. Over the weekend, 9 B-2 stealth bombers launched from Missouri. 2 were decoys that flew west. 7 others flew east over the Atlantic. And, of course, these bombers were refueled midair, ultimately entered Iran's airspace completely undetected. And according to my sources, the U.S. was even able to trigger false alerts and coordinates on Iran's air defense systems, causing them to shoot at what they thought were planes, but was absolutely nothing in the sky. Incredible, misdirection on the part of our military. The bombers then dropped, as Jennifer Griffin said, 14 massive bunker buster bombs, while a single submarine hundreds of miles away was able to deliver a payload of 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Deflection, precision, and ultimate perfection. None of the U.S. planes were fired upon. None of the munitions were intercepted. All of the targets were successfully hit. All was destroyed. And all of our U.S. servicemen and women thankfully made it out of Iran's airspace. What is a very difficult military operation. Thankfully, thank God, safe and sound. Make no mistake, President Trump didn't just decimate Iran's nuclear ambitions. He sent a message the entire world.
Shout out to the GOAT. God bless you. Thank you. You are absolutely appreciated. Shout out to Dr. Luke, the GOAT. Here we go. He says, President Trump has 60 days to send the military in and 30 days to get our military out without any permission from Congress. Absolutely. And the fact is, before he actually did give the order to obliterate the Iranian nuclear site, he gave Iran leaders 60 days. And what did they use it for? Absolutely nothing. They could have made a deal without that whole situation, before that whole situation happened. But they couldn't make a deal. I don't know, maybe it's ego or pride or whatever. And yet, this man still only went for the nuclear site. Shout out to Dr. Luke, the GOAT. Thank you. Here we go.
World was watching on Saturday night. The United States of America can hit any target at any time, anywhere in the world with precision, with planes sitting on a tarmac in the middle of America. I promise you, Russia, China, North Korea, all of them were paying very close attention to what was unfolding on Saturday. And meanwhile, Iran's supposedly powerful allies, Russia, China, nowhere to be found. In fact,
and I don't understand why people don't want Trump to win, especially like the liberals, the left, Democrats. If Trump wins, that means America is actually winning. When people say Trump wins again, it's like, yes, America wins again, because if he's making deals and it's helping the United States, he's winning, America is winning. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that what you should want as an American? Don't you want your leaders to win so that can reflect on your country? Isn't that why we voted for our leaders? To make deals that would help us. Isn't that what it's all about? When I say America is the greatest country on the face of the earth, it's like, yeah, but have you been to? Okay. Yes, America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Does that mean any other country isn't doing what they're doing? Yes, they could do what they're doing, but I live in the United States. I have my family in the United States. I've made great friends in the United States. I've made great communities here, online here. Dr. Luke, C. Shelley, Mr. Busky, every one of y'all here. I would not have met y'all if I was not in the United States. It's crazy to say, but it's true. It's the facts. So when I say the United States is the greatest nation on the face of the earth, have you been to Australia? Have you been to Saudi Arabia? What are we saying? What are you saying? I just told you the United States is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And that's it.
China even warned Iran not to block the Straits of Hormuz, one day after Secretary of State Marco Rubio urged China to do just that. And thanks to President Trump, thanks to his team, thanks to our amazing military men and women, American strength is back and better than ever and stronger than ever. And tonight, the world is thankfully a safer place, as President Trump stated over and over and over again. And the Iranians would not listen. They must never and will never get a nuclear weapon. Promise made, promise kept. As for the peace deal, you got to give the president a lot of credit for trying. Once again, Iran, they have another opportunity, if they choose it, for peace. How about they start by recognizing Israel and stop providing their proxies the weaponry so they're fomenting terror, not only in the region but around the world. Now, only time will tell if they do, but trust but verify peace through strength is now the foundation of President Donald Trump's doctrine. Hey, Sean Hannity.
Absolutely. After the missiles destroyed the nuclear sites, then everybody's like, oh, yeah, we want peace. Yeah, you better want peace because you don't want the smoke. Okay, you do not want to find out what's going on. All right, here we go. CNN. You know, CNN always has to twist what Trump says. But let's see what they have to say. Let's see. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see.
Iran retaliates. I'm Casey Hunt. Welcome to the arena. An American
Okay.
airbase in
Here we go.
Qatar coming under fire from medium and short-range ballistic missiles. Iran's supreme leader posting just moments ago, his nation, quote, will not surrender to anyone's violation. This video, released by Iran, reportedly shows the moment one of those missiles was launched. Iranian state media calling this operation, quote, blessings of victory. In a new post on his Truth Social platform, President Trump said that no Americans were harmed and that damage was minimal. He also confirmed that Iran gave advance warning that an attack was coming. The president adding that Iran had, quote, gotten it all out of their system, end quote. Al Udeid Air Base is America's largest installation in the Middle East. It's home to about 10,000 service members, and it's also the regional headquarters for U.S. Central Command. People at a shopping mall there in Doha running for safety upon hearing.
Of course, CNN. They go find a video of people running. Look what is going on. Look what is going on, everybody. Oh, man. CNN never disappoints. They never disappoints. All right. God bless you, Dr. Luke, the GOAT. Thank you. Here we go. It says Genesis gets views because he is a good guy and constantly online. Our chat is actually pretty civilized also. Absolutely. 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 Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. And thank you guys for being here. Absolutely. God bless you. Thank you guys. It means a lot. It means a lot for you guys to be here. And we do these shows because not because we don't like to go to bed, not because we don't like to go to bed, but because we love the United States. That's why. That's why we stay here together. That's why. Because we love the United States. We have that in common. All right? Here we go.
That Iranian missiles were headed toward their country. And this footage showing debris landing by the side of the road. It's unknown whether this is from an Iranian missile or a defensive interceptor. All of this coming less than 48 hours after American bombers and submarines struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites. A senior White House official says this retaliation was expected and that at this time, President Trump does not want more military engagement in the region. CNN across all angles of this story from around the world. Let's start at the White House with CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, of course, the question here, does it end with what we saw right now? Clearly, the president seems to be trying to send some signals that could be a possibility. What are you hearing?
There's no doubt that this message just sent a few moments ago from President Trump certainly signals what we've been hearing here for the last few hours, even as the missiles were being fired at the Al Udeid base outside Doha. There was a sense that President Trump and his team want to de-escalate, and this message certainly confirms that. Let's take a look at this and read it together, Casey. The president said Iran has responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected, and have effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, 1 was set free. He goes on to say, because it was heading in a non-threatening direction, he said, I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it out of their system. Interesting how the White House and the president would know that, because that certainly is an open question. But he goes on to say, I would like to thank Iran for giving us an early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. But Casey, perhaps the most important part of this, if we could put this back on screen again, the president says this: perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do this. So this is the first time we're hearing the U.S. president say out loud that he would like Israel to effectively stop its attacks on Iran. So certainly this would be significant. Iran has long said that they will not negotiate diplomatically as long as they are under attack. So we will see if this is anything more substantive than just the president sending out a message, but it certainly is a clear one that the U.S. is still looking for an off-ramp here for diplomacy. Very much an open question if that could happen. But there is no sign of a retaliatory response in exchange to the missile attack on Al Udeid. And ironically, the president was just on that base, the first president to visit since 2003. He was just there last month, spending some time with the troops there. So certainly that was top of mind as the White House Situation Room was watching those attacks unfold. But the president clearly taking a beat and certainly signaling a moment for diplomacy. Casey?
A lot of really fascinating layers there. And Clarissa Ward, it sets you up quite nicely in Tel Aviv, especially considering that line Jeff showed us about him almost encouraging the Israelis to make peace. What do you take away from that, and what do you think the Israelis will take?
Well, I think the Israelis have been projecting that they are starting to get somewhat close to the end of their operation in Iran. We heard from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, I believe the phraseology he used, we are very, very close. Having said that, it was still a very busy day over Iran's airspace, with Israel launching a number of strikes, one of the heaviest days of strikes. In fact, as our Fred Pleitgen on the ground in
Man, Dr. Luke, the GOAT, I am absolutely sorry. I'm trying to block this, folks. They made me delete your Oh my God. Whew. How do I put that message back? See? I can't even read what the GOAT put in the chat. Look, I was trying. Let me go find that person. I'm gonna make sure. Wait, let me go find that person. You can hear me. Yeah, this person, Onyx Orion. It says your daddy put himself like. That's who I'm trying to block. And all of a sudden, the chat was going so fast. It moved up to Dr. Luke, the GOAT. I'm sorry, Dr. Luke. All right. I'm about to block this dude. Doing way too much, man. Come on, man. What are you doing? It says, only CNN throws a childish temper tantrums for 10 years in a row. For sure. For sure. Anybody who says anything stupid about the United States should be blocked by the moderator. If you say anything stupid about the United States, if you don't say good things about the United States or the president, you need to be blocked. Okay? Fast. Shout out to the GOAT. God bless you.
Iran saw for himself. But Israel feeling quite confident that they have now, the claim of the Israeli Air Force is that they have destroyed roughly 50% or half of Iran's missile launchers. And it's interesting in terms of the reaction that we have heard, or the lack of real reaction we've heard towards Iran's attempted attack or missile strike on that base in Qatar. Basically, we heard the IDF spokesperson saying that it's another clear demonstration of Iran's hostility and violence, and the fact that it's not just a threat to Israel, but the whole region. I mean, that's what they're saying publicly. Privately, I think they're quite gratified to see Iran's response. They're assuming that if it is indeed one and done, so to speak, Casey, that's indicative of the fact that Iran is in a relatively weak position. And I should say, I've been talking to officials and experts around the region since.
Everybody's in the chat saying, well, you said it's freedom of speech. You said it's a free speech channel. Yes, but you can use your free speech to say, God bless America. Thank God for America. God bless the military. I pray the president makes the best decision for the people. You can use your free speech for good stuff. You want to use your free speech for dumb things, and you're going to get blocked.
Iran's response. And while publicly we're seeing the usual pro forma statements saying, condemning Iran's attack, privately you really sense a sense of relief, basically, that this was the least escalatory option that Iran could have gone with of all the options available to it, Casey.
Seems like a remarkable reality. And to that point, I mean, Christian Amanpour, Iran, of course, gave Qatar advance notice of the attack. The number of missiles that Iran used, the same number as the number of bombs that the U.S. used to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. What message do you take away there? They seem to be sending one.
Very clear messages being sent, and a very clear message back from the United States as well, that this was inevitable, that they had telegraphed, that they had no choice but to respond. The supreme leader of Iran, in the words of one analyst, was caught between saving face and saving his own neck. And they have done something that apparently the region and the United States expected, apparently it could have been telegraphed, and it follows very much the same pattern as what Iran did when President Trump in 1.0 ordered the assassination of the Quds chief commander of the Revolutionary Guards, Soleiman Qasemi, or rather Qasem Soleimani. And they telegraphed that they would have to respond, and it was this kind of response that didn't cause significant damage nor injury or death to any American service people. So the big bottom line here is, and the overarching message, and being telegraphed from certainly the United States, is that let's get diplomacy back on track. And Iran, I spoke to the deputy foreign minister. You heard what the foreign minister said over the weekend. We understand they have no intention of pulling out of the NPT. They're not going to go rogue. They're not going to do anything like that, they say, and they want to get back to negotiations. They had said, of course, that they could not negotiate while under bombardment. And so this may be the minute that this stops. And if President Trump says that to the Israelis, although the Israelis have really been leading this fight, it was Benjamin Netanyahu's for decades, and he's done it. But I spoke to a very senior Israeli, the former Mossad chief, Amos Yadlin, today, and he said our goal was to set back, if not destroy, Iran's nuclear program. We have probably done it. We don't have a full BDA, but we in the US have probably done it, and now we have to get back to negotiations. He actually said there is no such thing as destroying a nuclear program from the air. It has to be diplomacy, and it has to be, worked out. I spoke to the former Secretary of State, John Kerry, who said the same thing, that he hoped that President Trump would take into account what Iran called the proportionality of its response and go back to the negotiating table. I spoke to an Iranian former negotiator who said very similar things, that, look, we have to work this out with negotiations. Of course, from their perspective, they thought they were in negotiations before Israel struck that Friday ago and before the U.S. joined in over the weekend. But they believed that there'd been a framework offered to them by the United States, presented to them by Stephen Witkoff, the special envoy, and that it was one that was workable. I mean, in short, it's very similar to the nuclear deal as a temporary bridging method. And then willing, they said, to talk about the other thing that's been proposed, which is the consortium that the US and I think some Iranians have come up with, which would involve enrichment for a civilian program, but somewhere off the mainland of Iran. These are the plans, and we'll see whether they get a chance to work. But there is no way to fix this by military means alone, and diplomacy has to do the final job, including keeping inspectors in Iran to monitor everything that they do, which there had been under the JCPOA, Casey.
All right, Christiane Amanpour for us in London, Clarissa Ward in Tel Aviv.
Thank God President Trump actually won the election, because I cannot imagine somebody else being the commander-in-chief at this crucial moment. Here we go.
Weighed in on Iran's attempt at retaliation for U.S. strikes on its nuclear facilities this past weekend. Trump, writing on Truth Social, quote, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response. They've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Now, here's a look at Iran's response that Trump is now referring to as weak. Iran earlier today launching short and medium-range ballistic missiles toward a heavily fortified U.S. base in Qatar. U.S. officials say there are no reports of injuries or casualties among American troops or Qatari citizens. Now, this could be in part because of what President Trump pointed out in his post. Iran actually gave Qatar advance notice before the strikes. A source tells CNN this was intended to minimize casualties and preserve an off-ramp for the conflict. While Iran's thwarted attack today may have been on the lighter end of their retaliatory options, a new bulletin from the Department of Homeland Security warns Iran could try to target U.S. government officials if Iranian leaders believe the, quote, stability or survivability of their regime is at risk. This all follows new Israeli strikes on Iran today aimed at the notorious Evin prison in Tehran, known for housing political prisoners and Iran's military headquarters. CNN has this covered from every single angle. Fred Pleitgen in Iran, Aaron Burnett in the United Arab Emirates, Jeremy Diamond in Tel Aviv, Israel, and Jeff Zeleny at the White House in Washington, D.C. We want to start things off with CNN's Fred Pleitgen, who is in Tehran, Iran. Fred, what are you seeing on the ground there today, and what are you hearing from Iranian officials about what may come next?
Hi there, Phil. Well, first of all, as far as this retaliation is concerned, a couple of hours ago, the Iranians came out with statements saying that they had, in fact, launched a barrage of missiles towards the Al Udeid air base, run, of course, by the United States in Qatar. They said, and this came from a statement from Iran's Supreme National Security Council, that the amount of missiles fired by towards their facilities by the United States, obviously indicating that this could very well have been a tit-for-tat response by the Iranians. The Iranians are calling this a decisive response, a robust response, and they also say that it was successful. The Iranian state media, Phil, is saying that 6 of the missiles came through and hit their target. Obviously impossible for us to independently verify that.
Uh-oh.
Marvin, there were actually celebrations in the streets here in Tehran following that attack by the Iranians. And as far as today is concerned, we did see a lot of anti-aircraft fire coming here over the skies of Tehran this evening. Also, of course, preceding that were those Israeli airstrikes that you were talking about. Some of those airstrikes actually very close to our location. Earlier today, we heard
Fred Pleitgen, one of the few Western journalists in Tehran, having some issues there with his sound. We are going to keep in touch with him throughout the course of the show. Fred, thank you. Stay safe. I want to turn now to CNN anchor Aaron Burnett, who is also in the region. She's in the United Arab Emirates, near the Strait of Hormuz, a key strategic waterway in the Middle East. Aaron, Iran's attack today is only putting this entire region more on edge, it seems.
Yeah, more on edge. And of course, there's so much concern. I mean, if you look at between the air base here in the United Arab Emirates and obviously the massive naval presence here by the U.S. Navy, as well as in Bahrain, where the Fifth Fleet is, and in Qatar, where you saw those strikes from Iran today, you have up to 30,000 troops just here in the Gulf, where we're talking about right now on high alert tonight, Phil. Concern about what could happen. There had been a shelter-in-place order that had been issued by the U.S. Embassy in Qatar for American citizens when those missiles started coming in, short and long ranges. Fred was just describing from Iran. You saw a panic even at a mall and a region very much on edge. Also concern that the threat to Americans, while most specific on U.S. bases and military installations here in the Gulf and across the Middle East, also extends to Americans, whether that be in the form of terror attacks or lone wolf attacks or some sort of bombing attacks. Those are the real concerns and questions among American intelligence and also from sources saying what they are most worried about. But the airspace here, just to give you a sense of how dynamic the situation is, Phil, briefly when those missiles were coming in, we had people coming in from London. All of a sudden you see airspace closed, people unable to get into the United Arab Emirates, temporary pauses and closures and reroutes. Airlines like Air France have changed their service and started to cut back service altogether to the UAE, just to give you a sense, and to Saudi Arabia, to give you a sense of the region on edge and the stakes and how high they are. Behind me, Phil, the western tip of the Strait of Hormuz, that crucial shipping lane, a series of disputed islands with massive Iranian military presence behind us, and all of this pointing to, of course, the biggest tool, the biggest threat that Iran has at its disposal, which would be perhaps mining.
Shout out to the GOAT. The GOAT just said in the comment section, Dr. Luke, it says, Genesis, Trump is the popular president and his actions are very popular with Americans. Key word, with Americans, okay? Because don't forget, this man had 77.3 million votes, won every swing state, almost impossible for a Republican, but he did it. All right, moving forward, he says, the losers are losing all their conquered political ground. Dams move over. Make America great again is taking up space now. Because when people say MAGA, remember when Biden was like, the MAGA Republicans? Actually, MAGA means make America great again. What is bad about saying make America great again? I don't get it. Shout out to the GOAT. Here we go.
Or closing this crucial waterway for a fifth of the world's oil every day, but very much a region on edge. And the question of whether that strike in Doha was the first, whether it was what might be next, with U.S. military assets here on high alert. Phil?
Aaron, if you'll let me.
It's always about fear mongering. It's always be scared, live in isolation, don't go outside. Don't go outside. Make sure you be fearful. That's what we want you to do. Iran may be leaving. Why are we like this? CNN always finds a way to put fear in the heart of their listeners. That's why I always tell you guys, don't be fearful. God is still God. Don't you get it? God is still God. And I believe in the fact that God put the United States President, Donald J. Trump, in there for a reason. So I'm not going to be living a fearful life because CNN is saying, well, you better be. No, I'm not going to live a fearful life. Nah. And I implore you guys, please, you can be watchful. You can, you can be watchful. I mean, regardless, you should be watchful of your surroundings, but don't live a fearful life. This life that we have, it is limited. You're not going to live forever anyway. So why not just enjoy your life, enjoy the sun, live a colorful life, be grateful to God, and enjoy your family. Why would you want to live in a fearful life? Why would you want to live a fearful life? Yeah, I ain't doing that. No, I'm not doing that.
Kind of want to flash back to our past lives as finance economics reporters. based on what you were just talking about, and that is watching oil markets throughout the course of the day has been fascinating to me, because before, I think the rest of the world started to exhale a little bit based on the initial, or at least only retaliatory strike we've seen up to this point, markets were responding with a broad sense of, all right, that's it. We're in a good spot now. We can move forward on some degree in terms of where oil prices were. Is there a sense right now in the region that the Strait of Hormuz is not really on the table for Iranian retaliation?
I think it depends on who you talk to. And obviously, Phil, you and I both know they have never in the history, even amidst conflict, closed it before. So there's that, and the market takes solace in that. However, you talk to some in the Iranian government, when we are able to have conversations with them, and they will always put that out there as something that they could do, which, of course, as you could see, the oil markets at this point don't think that that's a real risk. It is interesting, though, you look at the market always as a gauge of what the future holds. We are living in a world where actions do not always match what would be the rational explanation that makes the most sense, right? Whether you see that on tariffs or what you see it on. So, yes, the markets see this as not a real risk. They see escalation of conflict itself as not a real risk. But it's also fair to say that 1 week ago.
So this is for Antoinette. This is for you. I know you are a Christian, okay? And there's nothing in this world that happens that God does not know about. If it happens, then God allowed it to happen. So when you say God did not put a president in the Oval Office, so you think the devil or evil is much more powerful than God? Man, where have we got into in this world that people put evil higher than good? People put the devil higher than God. What you Okay, everybody, relax. Calm down. Go in your fridge, get a cool glass of water, and just sit down, stretch your feet, take a deep breath, and drink your water, okay? God is still in charge. Okay? Calm down.
Or 10 days ago, the markets would never have thought that we'd be sitting here having these conversations that we're having right now.
That is such an important point. Aaron Burnett in the United Arab Emirates, thank you as always. And of course, Aaron will have much more from the region tonight on Aaron Burnett Out Front right after the lead, 7 o'clock Eastern here on CNN. I want to turn now to Israel and CNN's Jeremy Diamond, who is in Tel Aviv for us. Jeremy, what are you hearing from Israeli officials now that we've seen this response from Iran?
Well, Phil, as those ballistic missiles were headed towards that U.S. base in Qatar, Israeli officials here were certainly on high alert for the potential that Iran's retaliation might also extend to Israeli territory as well. They were prepared for a large barrage of ballistic missiles to be included in that retaliation, but ultimately it seems that for the moment at least, it's been limited to that one base in Doha, Qatar. And now Israeli officials are turning to what the coming days may hold. And in the same way that we are seeing across the region that the temperature is really starting to come down in the wake of what was clearly a carefully telegraphed and relatively limited attack by Iran, Israeli officials are also telling me that they believe that they can achieve their military objectives in Iran within the coming days, and that may then tee up the possibility for a ceasefire in this 10-day conflict. Of course, that will require some diplomacy here, and we don't yet know whether that will flow through the Europeans, perhaps through this channel that Steve Witkoff, this U.S. Special Envoy, has with Iran. But certainly, from the Israeli point of view, it certainly seems like they are headed in the direction of wrapping up their military operations in Iran in the coming days and showing a willingness to engage in diplomacy that would bring this conflict to an end, at least for now. Phil?
Jeremy Diamond for us in Tel Aviv. Thanks so much. Let's discuss now with retired U.S. Air Force General Philip Breedlove and national security expert Joseph Cirincione. General, to start with you, a source telling CNN Iran gave Qatar a heads up about this attack on the U.S. base there. The source saying it was intended to minimize casualties, provide a potential off-ramp. At the same time, a senior Iranian official tells Reuters that Iran will continue its retaliation in response to U.S. attacks. Level set for people here. Where do we stand as this plays out?
Well, thanks for having me on. And nobody really knows. But I think that what we have seen is Iran now is playing more to its internal audience than its external audience. the proportional sort of measure of what happened today, the fact that they warned ahead of time. I think they're looking to try to bring the temperature down, but they have sort of celebrated this with much more victory than actually happened to their internal audience. And I think that's their first concern right now.
In the hours following President Trump's announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, one question that comes and still remains tonight after the U.S. attacks in Iran is just how much of Iran's nuclear program is left intact, and also the levels of its enriched uranium. Vice President J.D. Vance was asked about that very matter just a few hours ago.
Do you know for sure where all the highly enriched uranium is?
Well, Brett, I think that's actually not the question before us. The question before us is, can Iran enrich the uranium to a weapons-grade level, and can they convert that fuel to a nuclear weapon? And we know, based on the success of our mission, of course, the leadership of the president, but the incredible skill of our military, that the two mission objectives are completely successful. We know that they cannot build a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked about the highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, like 900 pounds of it.
But what we know, Brett, is that uranium is something that exists in very large supply. Our goal was to bury the uranium, and I do think the uranium is buried, but our goal was to eliminate the enrichment and eliminate their ability to convert that enriched fuel into a nuclear weapon.
Joining me tonight, Jim Sciutto, CNN's chief national security analyst, and Jeff Zeleny, CNN's chief national affairs correspondent. And Jim Sciutto, on that answer there from Vice President Vance, obviously this was a key question coming out of Saturday night's attack, as the Pentagon said they were still assessing the full extent of the damage. We've certainly heard the president's assessments, including today. I wonder what you made of that answer, though.
Well, listen, I was going to say it's a non-answer. Actually, it was an answer in that he at least did not express confidence that they know where it is, right? He says they believe it to be buried underground, but I know for a fact that the Israelis don't know for sure where the bulk of it is, right? And that is part of their own battle damage assessment, which is still ongoing. A senior Israeli intelligence source told me, and he described it this way. He said, BDA, battle damage assessment, is an art more than a science, and it requires more than satellite photos. It requires human intelligence on the ground, signals intelligence, intercepted communications of Iranian officials talking about what damage took place, etc. And from the Israeli perspective, that's still taking place. They don't have an answer to two questions, really: the extent of damage to the facilities, but also the whereabouts of all of that enriched uranium. And we heard from the podium of the Pentagon just in the last 24 hours that, at least from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that they have not completed their own BDA either. So the fact is, it doesn't appear that they know yet, right, despite the confidence you hear expressed from the president and the vice president. And that will be important in knowing exactly how much damage you've done to the program for the long term.
And Jeff, as far as this ceasefire playing out and what we are watching for so closely over the next few hours, can you just walk us through behind the scenes at the White House, what's been happening there as all of this has been playing out in terms of phone calls and conversations that led up to the president's post tonight?
I mean, Caitlin, an extraordinary day here, but if you think back, really an extraordinary 48 hours or so. It was just 48 hours when the president was announcing to the nation that the strike had been carried out. A day later, he was calling for regime change. And tonight, we're talking about a ceasefire seems within reach. Now, there's no doubt the White House is keeping a very careful eye on the region tonight. There is a time frame in this agreement that has been worked on throughout the day, really in a series of phone calls, we are told. It was a rare day. We did not see the president in public view at all, but he was in the Oval Office earlier in the day, throughout the day, all day long, making these phone calls, working with the vice president, working with the secretary of state. The president, we are told, got the agreement, of course, from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but of course it was the Iranian side that was the more difficult agreement to broker. And in the middle of all of this, of course, which is somewhat related, missiles were fired onto the El Udeid air base outside of Doha, of course, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, where the president just visited last month. But that was largely seen as something of an act, if you will, an act of aggression. It was clear that the White House administration, the U.S. government, was waiting for some type of of a retaliation. So throughout the day, Caitlin, as you know, you were here with me, many officials were going back and forth all day long, the Situation Room, other places, but most did not know what was going on. It wasn't until 6 p.m. that the president once again announcing this on Truth Social. So we've had a military strike on Iran announced on Truth Social, and now a potential ceasefire. But the coming hours are very, very important. So there's no recognition that this is definitively done until the sun comes up and until things actually begin to be formalized. But the president, we are told, is still heading out, leaving very early tomorrow morning for the NATO summit in the Netherlands, and he's carrying with him a freshly brokered peace deal that few thought was possible only a few hours ago.
Anderson, I just want to read to you, as we've been watching to see and wait for formal responses from the Israelis and from the Iranians. The foreign minister of Iran is now weighing in on the president's announcement tonight. They're denying that there is a formal ceasefire agreement, as he says that as of now, there is no agreement on any ceasefire or cessation of military operations. He says, quote, however, provided that the Israeli regime stops its illegal aggression against the Iranian people no later than 4 a.m. Tehran time, we have no intention to continue our response afterwards.
Yeah, it's a little confusing given, whether the term agreement is for whatever reason they don't want to use. It does seem like they are going to be stopping along the same timeline that the president seemed to indicate. Remains to be seen if this happens. As you said, according to the president's timeline, these dominoes should begin to fall in about 3 hours from now. So we will obviously be watching very closely to see what happens as dawn really starts to break here in the region. But it's just been an extraordinary 24 hours here. Caitlin, as you know, as you were covering it, first of all, with the Iran response, the much awaited Iranian response to the massive strikes by the United States, by the Trump administration, a response they telegraphed, according to all the reporting, to Qatar before it occurred, and telegraphed to the world that this was going to be a limited, what they would view as proportional in the sense of the number, they highlighted the number of missiles fired by Iran toward Qatar, which they warned the Qataris about, and then obviously the U.S. was warned as well, is equal to the number of actual bombs, the bunker buster bombs that were dropped by the United States. Obviously the U.S. also fired Tomahawk missiles, but they didn't include that in their calculus of missiles fired. It's clearly this kind of pre-negotiated, pre-discussed response. They felt they had to respond in some way. They did, and they were telegraphing this is going to be it, essentially one and done, which is exactly what, the administration heard that, listened to, and then was able to, according to the president, get this agreement, though the Iranian foreign minister is not calling it an agreement.
Well, and it's notable, obviously, that the president was on the phone today with the prime minister of Israel, obviously having conversations about this exact agreement that he was trying to get them to settle on. I do think it's notable that we have not heard anything officially from the Israelis yet, a confirmation of this in the 3 hours since the president posted about it.
It is interesting, and I'm not sure why that would be. Obviously, according to this timeline, they are.
Shout out to the GOAT. God bless you. Thank you so much for your super chat. Dr. Luke, God bless you. He says, Genesis, you have been hardened in the furnace of hardship. It's amazing to witness your transformation. God bless. Wow. Okay, Dr. Luke, do not get me emotional, okay? Don't get me emotional, the GOAT. Do not get me emotional. I'm going to read that one more time. Dr. Luke says, Genesis, you have been hardened in the furnace of hardship. Strong words, my brother. Strong words. And he says, it's amazing to witness your transformation. God bless. Well, God bless you, Dr. Luke. Thank you so much. And that means a lot coming from you. Thank you so much. Shout out to Jamie Burlington for Super Chat. God bless you. Here we go.
We're still able to have operations going on over Iran. We haven't been able to contact Fred Pleitgen into Tehran. I think earlier we talked to him. There was still military activity going on in the skies over Iran. Remains to be seen how long they continue those operations for. That's obviously something that's going to be crucial if the president's stated timeline is to be stuck to.
Yeah, Anderson on the ground in Tel Aviv. We'll check back in with you throughout the hour. And also now I want to go to Aaron Burnett. And Aaron, the questions, in this region of what this ceasefire means. I mean, today alone, we saw the implications that this goes far beyond.
So I was looking through some videos earlier today, and I saw a veteran without, I think, his left leg, and he was working out in the gym, and it was saying how much he loved the United States. And I don't know how or why, but I just started crying. It's like, this man lost his leg, and yet he has the courage to say, God bless the United States. And you have everything. These people go out to fight for the United States, and you are here, and you can't even say that the United States is the greatest country on the face of the earth. You cannot say that. Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's just crazy.
On just Israel and Iran, given Iran was firing on that U.S. base in Qatar, one of the biggest military installation that the U.S. has in the Middle East. What's the latest on the ground there tonight?
Well, so, obviously it's dawn here as Anderson's talking a little bit later in the morning here, already just after 5 o'clock in the morning, Caitlin. And, the big question is whether this will hold. Talking to sources, as we were here in the region today, you had airspace closed, you had flights not coming in, you have flights being canceled to Dubai from multiple airlines, to Riyadh. Really important and significant steps being taken as all of this was being negotiated. And on that, really fragile and concerned. Some sources in the region, though, one very senior diplomatic source telling me of this ceasefire, Caitlin, and his words, quote, I think it
See, Shelley, yo, you are too funny.
Actually might hold. So there is a hope for that. These are very senior officials who are saying that. But on the Iranian side, I think, as you point out, the timeline here is so crucial. Sources there are telling me that, as Qatar started talking to Iran, those conversations were happening. But hours after those conversations started, that was when Trump posted on Truth Social that there was a ceasefire. And he did that before having any response, they say, from Iran. So the question is, Iran now saying, at least sources there are telling me, well, okay, we'll go with this depending what Israel does, just what you saw the foreign minister post. Important, though, to note, as we hear from the foreign minister, we have not yet heard from the supreme leader, and our reporting is that he has been in hiding in a bunker. And there's a real question as to what he knows, what he's communicated, what's been communicated to him. And a lot is resting on the answer to that question, which, of course, we don't know the answer to that at this moment here as dawn is hitting here on the Straits of Hormuz, Caitlin.
Yeah, and of course we get a lot of bombastic statements from the Iranians. The question is, what do they actually do here? And if they stop.
He just told you there has been a ceasefire deal. Can you just say that? Like,
Fareed, as is often the case in our current news cycles, as you were talking, the president just posted on Truth Social moments ago saying, quote, a ceasefire has been, quote, fully agreed to by Israel and Iran. There will be a complete and total ceasefire 6 hours from now. Again, this just happened. I don't want to spring this on you. And we're trying to figure out exactly what it means. It's a rather lengthy post on Truth Social. Again, we had been reporting, Clarissa and I were just discussing, that there were warnings about strikes in Tehran. There have been strikes throughout the course of the day. What do you think this means?
Well, it follows exactly what I was saying. Trump is now clearly trying to transition from war maker to peacemaker, and he's used his considerable influence with Bibi Netanyahu. Let's remember the Israelis also did massive damage. I would argue the Israeli strikes were probably more significant in setting back the Iranian program than even the American strikes, because they got to 20 of the top scientists, 20 of the top military officials, degraded almost every facility, destroyed Iran's air defenses. So Israel feels like it can stop. Trump wants to move into a peacemaking role. He wants it to stop. The Iranians obviously have no, I mean, it's only good for them because they have not been able to really respond in any sense to Israel's pummeling attacks because they don't have much capacity. But then the question becomes, what do those negotiations look like? The key stumbling block has been this. President Trump began the negotiations saying Iran could have some enrichment capacity, but it couldn't be the kind that could be weaponized. The Israeli position has been no, zero enrichment under any circumstances. The Iranian position has been we have to have the legal right to enrich, which is our right under the NPT. So that's where you have it. Israel and Iran were at complete loggerheads. The U.S. had a middle position. About 2 weeks ago, Trump moved to the Israeli position. So the question is, now that he wants to be a peacemaker, is there going to be any give there? Or do the Iranians feel they're so weak, they have no option but to move to concede to the Israeli position? That is going to be the heart of the negotiations once they begin.
Yeah, the incompatible red lines haven't changed to any degree that we are aware of at this point. Fareed, stand by. I want to go straight to Jeff Zeleny over at the White House because, Jeff, we're all just digesting this in real time right now, and it seems there's a couple caveats, a couple elements in this. What do we know about what the president just posted?
Well, what we know is the president clearly is trying to move on very quickly, not only to turn the page, but to try and close the book on this entire 12-week episode. And we're seeing the message right there on Truth Social, which just came out. And Phil, I mean, never mind how extraordinary it is to basically explain what the president hopes would be the end of a war in a Truth Social post, rather than having officials actually explain it or the president himself. But the question is, several come to mind. One, does the president speak for Iran here? I mean, he could certainly speak for Israel, more likely that an endgame would be in sight, as we've been reporting. But it's a very much an open question, what he knows that would lead to a ceasefire. But separate of all of this, Bill, the same question remained right now tonight as it did before this message was sent out. What about the Iran nuclear program? The president has insisted it was obliterated. The president has insisted that it was wiped away. There is no evidence of that yet. So you just get the sense that President Trump is trying to move on from this very quickly, as he often does on things that are somewhat controversial. This has been controversial among his movement. There's no doubt about that. There's a classified briefing on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Many deep questions from both sides of the aisle about this. So the president clearly is trying to put this in the rearview mirror. Well, that would defy history in one respect, but also, again, the question of what is left of Iran's nuclear program. And we simply do not know the answer to that.
Jeff Zeleny for us at the White House. Thank you very much. We're going to continue to follow all of this breaking news. Joining us now is Democrat from Illinois, Congressman Mike Quigley. He's on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, as we kind of try and understand exactly what the president is laying out here on Truth Social, what's your initial reaction to the potential for a ceasefire that's being announced here?
Oh, look, we always welcome a ceasefire. There's always room for diplomacy. It's also important to understand how we got here. The hopes is that they continue to move toward a negotiated agreement here. But that agreement sounds a heck of a lot like the JCPOA, right? The deal that Iran was in compliance with years ago. They weren't creating material necessary for a bomb. And President Trump pulled us out of that deal. And so Iran went forward developing that material, creating a threat, which he now has to go bring us to a brinksmanship form, totally unnecessary.
The administration was scheduled to conduct an all-member House briefing on their intelligence, where things stood in the operation from the weekend. There were a lot of questions, not just Democrats, Republicans had as well, going into that briefing. What did you learn?
Well, look, all we can talk about is the fact that those threats are there. The fact of the matter is Iran is one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism, and that this attack created a very real risk for our allies and the United States at home, and obviously great concerns for our 40,000 troops throughout the Middle East and those bases there. And look, as your reporting just talked about, it's going to take some time before we know where the Iran nuclear program is. I'll say this. It's extremely complicated. They're very difficult targets. And what we're talking about here is extremely mobile. So I think it's beyond the realm of normal optimism to think that the system, the process, and where they're going has been obliterated. There are still very real concerns, but we're going to learn a lot more in the coming days and weeks.
And again, I'm very aware there are very significant limits to what you can say coming out of a briefing like the one you were just in. But it seems to be what you're saying is the president's contention that the program was destroyed, obliterated, no longer exists, does not track with your understanding of things after this briefing.
I'd rather put it in a more general way. I've been on the committee over 8 years, and whenever there's an attack like this, it takes a long time to fully assess what has taken place, what the actual results are. The fact of the matter is, it's an area that we're denied, and it's much tougher to get a true assessment. And generally, before the briefings, we all knew this stuff was very mobile. So I knew when the president said it was obliterated, it is the hyperbole of the president on a typical basis that nothing is ever going to be maybe or halfway. It's going to be total. And that's just not the way these operations work. They're never completely successful. Again, it's a difficult mobile target.
It's really important context. Congressman, really appreciate your time, especially coming out of that briefing. Thanks.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. Here we go. More CNN.
How far is too far? Sources tell CNN that Democrats are introducing a new war powers resolution to rein in President Trump's authority, arguing that Trump overstepped his power when he ordered the attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, it all comes as top Democrats say the White House is intentionally keeping them in the dark.
I asked for a Gang of Eight briefing. It has yet to occur. And it's not clear to me what the administration is hiding from the Congress and from the American people.
And by the way, I mean, let's not lose sight of the fact that that an offensive attack against a foreign nation is something that the Constitution reserves to the Congress of the United States.
We had Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, a Republican, here last week, and she was saying they're not going to brief us until after this thing is all said and done. And there is something about that, Scott, that, maybe you don't go to a full vote in the Congress, but to wait until you've already taken the action to brief even the Gang of Eight, this is a smaller group of senior leadership in the Congress, about what the intelligence says, I think is pretty extraordinary.
Well, they did call Schumer, and I know they talked to him, and they tried to call Jeffries, who apparently didn't pick up the phone. So I know some calls were made. Look, one of the ways to keep things from leaking is to not tell a bunch of people who leak. And so, I'm sensitive to this.
The Gang of Eight,
this is a pretty sensitive operation. There was a lot of misdirection. There was a lot of stuff going on here.
Is a close hold.
I know, and they called Schumer, and they tried to call Jeffries, and they told the Republicans. And look, we're not going to debate this in an open committee hearing when we're, on a tight time window. You got bombers going one way, bombers going another way. I mean, this thing had to be held airtight, and that's what they did, and it worked perfectly.
Except that Donald Trump tweeted his way or truthed his way through the whole thing. I mean, we do have to remember.
Are you arguing it wasn't a success?
Literally did not say that. I'm just saying President Trump spent a lot of time talking through this publicly on social media to the point where they had to have a contingency plan to have B-2s going in opposite directions just in case they needed to sort of misdirect the Iranians.
But we don't know whether it was a success or not. But you don't make a major judgment like that based on a one-day span. He's come out and said, I have a covenant with the American people. I tell them the truth. What do I say? We have completely and totally obliterated. No, you haven't. That's a lie, Brother Trump. Get off the crack pipe. You destroyed. You had severe damage. You didn't completely obliterate. Was there complete obliteration, you think?
Is there intelligence that you possess that says that?
Yes. You
Have
know
you
why
been in
I
this
know
situation?
it? Because if, in fact, there was evidence for it, they would make it available, my brother. The fact that they not make it available means there's a good chance that they don't.
The War Power Resolution, though, I would say, like, there is a reason for Congress to exist. Right now, our Congress has a bunch of peacocks who like to appear on television and not do their job, which is frustrating because then when you are trying to brief people and have serious conversations, they're trying to score a political point, and that sucks. It sucks for Democrats and for Republicans. If that changed, then 100% I think Congress should, because they will deal with the financial repercussions of Trump's decision with their budget. We all have to figure out what we want to pay for, and if we're going to authorize just strikes all the time. It is a real question because this does cut our budget.
Yeah, but look, the reality is the War Powers Resolution is a hotly debated question, right? Congress has the power to declare war. The president's commander-in-chief. The Constitution has tension in it about who's authorized to do what when. So Congress has tried to resolve it by saying the president can deploy forces overseas into hostilities for up to 60 days simply by notifying Congress. He doesn't have to get their approval at all to do it. That's the War Powers Resolution. People always get confused and say, no, it requires the president to get congressional approval. That is not true. For up to 60 days, the president can go forward. And in fact, the Obama administration attacked Libya and said we can go past 60 days because it's not hostilities, because they're not firing back.
It's funny you should mention that. Here's what Republicans said about that very thing 14 years ago.
The Constitution is very clear. You don't go to war without a declaration.
This latest decision was taken without adequate consultation with Congress.
When you commit U.S. troops and resources to combat, you should consult with Congress.
Allowing this assertion to stand unchallenged would increase the risk that presidents will conduct similar military interventions in the future without seeking or receiving congressional authorization.
They've never gone to the Congress for any authorization, and that has led to some pretty inflamed or, shall I say, bruised egos around here, and understandably, because the president should consult with Congress.
So let's be honest. I mean, whenever it's like with a lot of things in Washington, when it's your team doing it, you're fine with it. When it's the other team doing it, you're not. And I think this is one of those cases as well.
I love that you showed John McCain there at the end, because he famously would say every senator looks in the mirror and sees a future president of the United States. I think he was wrong. I think every senator sees the current president of the United States. They believe they are commander in chief. And Lindsey Graham said it, I think, yesterday. There cannot be 535 commanders in chief. There is one. And when it comes to making decisions that are related to national security and protecting the interests of America, we can't wait for Congress to get their pesky hands in it and delay and delay and delay and delay. And then the window of opportunity would be completely gone. But I do want to say,
I think you're right. I just have to say that the thing about it, though, is that it's always fine to start something.
Yes.
But when it comes time to finish it, then you have to go to Congress, and Congress has no choice.
What would happen if the Iranians deployed a nuclear weapon and then they looked at the government and said, why didn't you do something about this?
I'm not advocating one way or another about this. I'm just saying that it's always easiest to say, oh, Mr. President, go do whatever you want to start this thing. But when Congress comes into play is usually when it comes time to finish it. And that's when things get really tricky. And that's when the American people starts to push back on these conflicts.
But here's the thing, Abby. The U.S. has been in conflict overseas and deployed troops into combat, into hostilities over 300 times since 1982. Congress has authorized use of military force 3 times.
I think that is exactly that's the problem.
But Sister Abby's powerful point is, it's hypocrisy on steroids when the Republicans do it and you get to rationalize other Republicans. Democrats do it, rationalizing other Democrats. Who's going to speak the truth?
Well, and what do we get out of these conflicts? I mean, that's the bigger question, is like, what's the end result?
One thing is that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. That's the one thing we got today.
Do we know that? That's the big question tonight.
Good to me.
Okay, here we go.
Well, I'm glad you're the one with the champagne.
Probably never had one.
At a minimum,
I'm not so sure.
At a minimum, they're a lot further back today.
That's true.
Than they were a week ago, than they were a year ago.
But they never had
one. We have to
one.
rely on some JCPOA agreement where we're going to bet that Iran might do the right thing.
I was a Jayhawk at the University of Kansas when they were playing bombs over Baghdad and celebrating that we were going to war with Iraq. What did we get for that? That's why you have people who were former service members in these wars saying,
Jamil,
we want to say.
Real quick, I mean, if every time Iran, because they're going to get close again.
Yeah.
Are we just going to have to bomb them every time?
You know, that's a really interesting question. I think that what you might see, if they continue to try and enrich domestically, you may very well see Israel go after those targets. You may very well see the U.S. have to step in. The reality is this is exactly why we have to make it clear to Iran, no domestic enrichment. You want a civilian nuclear program? You can get your uranium from elsewhere. No domestic enrichment. This is the original sin. JCPOA was the original sin by allowing Iran, a terrorist state, to have domestic enrichment capabilities. That was the mistake by the Obama administration. It was the right thing for President Trump to walk away from it.
It depends. This is the first time we've ever actually gone this far. In the past, I think they thought, well, you know, Americans aren't strong enough or bold enough to actually come in here and do something about it. We'll talk. They'll send us pallets of cash, whatever. In this case, we sent Operation Midnight Hammer. It's the first time we've gone that far, so maybe it will prove to be a deterrent for the future.
You can't bomb your way to peace, though. And peace is not.
Man, please. That man is always calling everybody brother. Wait, brother. And then he goes on and says something reckless. Anyway, so there is an update saying that Iran has just violated the ceasefire deal. Check this out.
We begin this morning with a Fox News alert. Israel now ordering the IDF to respond forcefully after claiming Iran violated their ceasefire agreement. The IDF saying missiles were launched from Iran after the midnight deadline imposed by President Trump.
In just the last few minutes, Israel ordering high-intensity strikes against regime targets in the heart of Tehran, and this violation of the deal comes less than an hour before the President of the United States is expected to leave for the NATO summit. You're watching Fox and Friends First on a Tuesday morning that is moving very, very rapidly. I'm Todd Pyro.
And I'm Carla Shimkitz. Let's get right to Mike Tobin with the very latest on the ground in Israel. And Mike, here we go again.
Well, things are moving very fast, Carly and Todd. Iranian state TV now denies that they will that the Iranian government, the Iranian military, was responsible for those 1 or 2 missiles that went into Israel's north. We're still looking to confirm the specific number on that. Now, that missile was intercepted and landed without injury, but not without consequence. As you mentioned, Israel's defense minister and the chief of general staff have now vowed fierce retaliation for the violation of a ceasefire that wasn't quite 4 hours old when those missiles came in the north of Israel. But again, Iran is denying that they took part in that. Now, as the ceasefire was preparing to take hold, about 5 waves of ballistic missiles came in from Iran. One of them hit down here in Beersheba, where I'm standing right now. And as we look behind me, you can see what looks like the impact site from that missile is indeed the impact site from the missile. You can see rescue crews right now going through the rubble, searching for any possible people who are trapped in the rubble. It should be mentioned that no one is missing right now. They're just operating out of abundance of caution. One of the things I've seen the rescuers doing today is forming up an old-fashioned bucket brigade, carrying rubble out of that building just to clear as much space as they can. Now, we do know that a family of 4 was inside of the bomb shelter. That bomb shelter took a direct hit. Here is a spokesman from Homefront Command.
What we understand currently, that the family was inside the shelter, and unfortunately, when we have a direct hit, a direct strike of a missile in the shelter, it did not always help.
So those bomb rooms do a good job of protecting people in the blast radius, but when you have a powerful warhead like the one that came down here and it takes a direct hit, all 4 of those people perish. There was an additional 26 people who were injured by the force of that blast, and their injuries vary. So we're watching the situation. When these missiles were fired, the Israeli fighter jets were in the air over Iran. They detected the missile launches and struck back at least some of those missile launchers. So that has taken place all today. But the situation now, of course, is very fragile with Israel's defense minister and the chief of general staff vowing to strike back at Iran for what they say is a flagrant violation of the ceasefire. Iran now says they didn't do it. You could be looking to one of the other rogue elements, a rogue element inside of Iran, or one of the other proxies that are operating in the region. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, and Mike, what I'm hearing you say is at least 1 missile was intercepted after the ceasefire went into effect, but Iran is denying that it took part in that. So if not Iran, then who?
Correct. One missile in. I'm sorry, my earpiece is going in and out, but at least one missile was intercepted. No injuries reported on the ground. The tops of the Israeli military saying that the ceasefire has been violated and saying that they'll respond.
All right, Mike Tobin live for us in Israel. Mike, we will check back in with you as warranted. With that, let us bring in former Deputy National Security Advisor and Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security, Victoria Coates. And Victoria, you heard Mike Tobin say Iran is denying that their government was responsible for these strikes. But assuming that that is not correct, assuming that the Iranian government is ultimately responsible, is this a mere hiccup? Can the ceasefire be saved? Or has Iran potentially crossed a red line from which they cannot come back?
Well, Todd, unfortunately, this is the kind of messy period that generally happens around a ceasefire, where a side that is typically on the losing side is going to try to get a little bit more. They're going to try to have a last strike, something for domestic consumption that they can say that they, are still powerful. And, we've seen what Iran is capable of. What they do is they fire at apartment buildings, at families sheltering in bomb shelters. This is hardly the stuff of a great military victory. Israel, on the other hand, is flying with impunity over Tehran right now, and I'm sure will take another strike on a strategic target, something like the missile launchers that will prevent Iran from doing this again. But it doesn't take away from what President Trump has achieved, which is that he's gotten both sides to agree to a ceasefire. It is time to end this war and consolidate Israel's and America's gains.
So you think that despite the fact that Israel is claiming that Iran launched a missile into Israel, and they're saying that the ceasefire is off, do you think that
Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. God bless you. Thank you for the super chat. Dr. Luke says, no, Jerome, Iran broke the ceasefire agreement. Key word is agreement. This is not a good look for Iran. I don't know how they're going to have to play this or explain this to Israel or the president of the United States. But just like the GOAT mentioned right here, it says Iran broke the ceasefire agreement. And the key word here is it was an agreement. So I don't know, Iran. I don't know. Let's keep going. Let's see what happened. Let's just see what happens.
Todd said, could this be a hiccup? Could things proceed more peacefully in the hours to come?
Well, Carly, I never want to refer to the death of a family of four as a hiccup. I mean, we have to be mindful of the seriousness of that.
Yeah, and
but
Victoria understood on that point. The death of the family took place, and horrible that it happened. It took place before the official ceasefire went into effect, and now that now we're in a new world where every party agreed to a ceasefire, and then a missile was launched. So, how do people proceed forward?
Well, I think that we can proceed forward if the situation calms down, if Israel does take a retaliatory strike, and then we can get back to the ceasefire, because I think Israel has achieved largely their war aims. That's what they said last night. And so I think if the president gets involved, if Iran understands the seriousness of the situation, and that both Israel and the United States are prepared to go back in if they don't start behaving more rationally.
Yeah, I cannot imagine the president is happy with these latest developments out of Israel. How should President Trump respond?
Well, I think President Trump will respond decisively. I mean, I think he's going to make very clear to the Iranians these are the terms. They are in an extremely weak position. Both Israel and the United States can act, as I said, with impunity against them. And so it is beholden on Iran now to start becoming a more responsible partner here. They have been given every opportunity, both before this war started, to engage in diplomacy, and now the president yesterday offering them the opportunity to come to the table and come to terms. Now, his patience, as we've discovered, is not infinite. So this better shut down now and they'd better come to the table in the mood to make concessions so that we can get to the end of this war.
Yeah, and President Trump is going to be leaving for the NATO summit in just a few hours. What will the conversation during the NATO summit be surrounding all of this?
Well, I think it's going to be about the need for NATO to take a lot of responsibility for what's happening in Europe. This is a big demonstration of all of the obligations the United States has around the world, not just in Ukraine, also in the Middle East, also in the Pacific. So I think the president is going to go back to one of his signature issues, which is making the rest of NATO pay its fair share for the defense of the alliance. And we have the top 10 economies in NATO, the top economy being the United States. The other 9 are clinging at 2% of GDP to defense, not the 3.5 they need to be at. They're not even close. And so I think he's going to be laying down the law there and saying if NATO is going to proceed into the 21st century, if it's going to be relevant, it has to literally have cash on the barrelhead here. We don't want pledges. We don't want some sort of projection of maybe getting to 2% in 3 or 4 years. We want them to pay up now.
Assuming, for argument's sake, that Iran, their government, is responsible for these strikes and not some proxy group like Mike Tobin alluded could be the case in light of the fact that Iran is denying that they are involved in this. Did Iran pick this timing in order to embarrass President Trump as he heads to NATO? And if so, how big of a miscalculation is that?
Well, I don't know how specific it was in terms of embarrassing the president. I would say that it was a miscalculation on the part of Iran if they were responsible. It's kind of this, as I said, this gray zone around the establishment of a ceasefire that it can be kind of a difficult period. But I think the key is for him to send the message to the Iranians that this is unacceptable. That if they want to get to diplomacy, they're going to have to start acting responsibly. And otherwise, he's going to take the gloves back off and let the Israelis go back in.
And this is the statement from Defense Minister Israel Katz. I have instructed the IDF to respond forcefully to Iran's violation of the ceasefire with high-intensity strikes against regime targets in the heart of Tehran. So with that, would you say that the war is officially back on right now?
Well, let's see what the Israelis actually do. I think some targeted strikes in response to this would be proportionate, and then the ball goes back into the Iranians' court. So I think we'll see what the next couple of hours bring.
Oh,
but,
my God.
This was not a good move on the part of the Iranians, but I do think the ceasefire is recoverable.
And finally, Todd alluded to it, but Israel is saying that one missile was intercepted, and Iran is denying that they took part in it. Could it have been a proxy and not an Iranian strike, or is Israel able to tell and determine that this was coming from Iranian airspace?
Well, if we haven't figured that out yet, Carly, we will be able to figure out in pretty short order. And I would be a little bit surprised because the Iranian proxies have been remarkable for their silence over the course of this 12-day war. We haven't seen a single rocket fired from Hezbollah. Hamas has been quiet. Even more surprisingly, the Houthi have been quiet. So it's possible one of them might have fired something off. But as I said, the Israelis are going to be able to tell pretty quickly what the trajectory of this thing was. And I'm sure they will publish those results.
And to that point, it would be odd for the proxies to act now, which really does call into question Iran's denial of them being responsible for this strike. Victoria Coates, we threw a lot at you.
Well, here we are, a couple of hours after the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, the 45th, now the 47th, mentioned that there was a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran. But unfortunately, according to what we just heard, Iran has just broken that agreement. So now it looks like Israel has to respond. Now, when Israel responds, Iran would say they have to respond, or is this going to keep going on? Let's see what the Commander-in-Chief will say after he sees this. Or, of course, I'm sure he's been briefed for sure, because that man hardly sleeps. He is supposed to be attending NATO conference. Now he has to deal with this. That's why when I say pray for the president of the United States, he's dealing with a lot. Okay. A lot is resting on his shoulders. So he needs our prayers. Doesn't matter if you're liberal or a conservative, it does not matter. Well, most conservatives are praying for him, but liberals, you can join that and just pray for your leader. Don't think that you're praying for Trump. You're praying for the leader God put in there to lead, basically. So, in other words, God is the greatest. We pray for peace regardless of what's going on. I believe peace will reign, and I believe Trump is the man for the job. Trump is the man God has put in there to do the job. But Iran should calm down, because you don't want to F around and find out, okay, the Iranian supreme leaders, not the Iranian people. Iranian people are definitely good guys, but the leaders there, they've definitely just subjected those people. They've subjected them to a police state where they can't even say some things. You can't do some things because your life might just be in danger. So Iran needs to chill. Iran needs to chill. Iran needs to chill, man. This has to stop, okay? So look, it's over. Relax, all right? Lick your wounds and pray for a better day, okay? Pray for a better day. Lick your wounds and just pray for a better day, all right? God is the greatest. With that being said, instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on your dreams. Never give up on God. Believe in yourself. Believe in your dreams. And believe in Almighty God. God is the greatest. America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Say that one more time. God is the greatest. America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. With that being said, I want to say a big thank you to our esteemed member of the GOAT. Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. God bless you. You are a blessing. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for always being here. You are amazing and you are appreciated. Thank you. Shout out to the hardworking moderators, the awesome moderators that we have. C. Shelley, thank you so much for being here. Shout out to Mr. Booski, the Bucket Master. God bless you. Shout out to Jet. He's not here. Shout out to Enders. Enders is not here as well. Derek, I see you in the chat. Shout out to Rain Promo. Shout out to everybody for coming in here. God bless you, Dead Star. God bless you. 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 Also, shout out to the other esteemed members, Ellie, Sandra, the Ringmaster. God bless you guys for being members. And once again, shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. With that being said, thank you to the military personnel. Thank you to the veterans. Without you guys, we would have no homeland. And my goal, or my prayer, and my dreams is one day there would be no homeless veteran and there would be no hungry veteran. Hopefully, one day we get there in the United States. I know it's possible. So we have to get on that. We should not have homeless veterans or hungry veterans. And I just want to say thank you to the law enforcement officers and ICE, baby. ICE, thank you for doing your federal duty. No matter how people protest, ICE should keep doing their federal duty. And fathers, take care of your kids. No matter what you have to go through. Life is hard. I get it. But take care of your kids. It is very, very important for us to take care of our kids. Mothers have been holding it down for decades. So, shout out to the mothers and fathers. Don't forget, take care of your kids. All right. And also, this is for everybody here, everybody tuned in. Life is hard. Okay. Some people are living paycheck to paycheck. Some people are battling some sort of disease. Some people are in the hospital right now. Some people are going through some sort of mental health issues, depression and stuff. So let's be kind to one another. Okay. Let's just be kind to one another. Life is not always rosy. It's not always going to be rosy, but understand that God got you. God is still God and Jesus is King. So let love lead. All right. Like I always say, it's not about liberals or conservative. We are Americans. Okay. We should be our brothers and sisters' keeper, regardless of what you're going through. All right. But I want to say I love you guys and hang in there. Hang in there. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Never give up. I know it's hard. Sometimes it's like, oh man, I can't do this anymore. But guess what? God is your strength. Okay. God is your strength. He didn't bring you here to abandon you or just leave you alone. So stay strong. Never give up. Stay strong. Never give up. And have it at the back of your mind that God is your strength. Okay. And with that being said, it is your boy Genesis. God bless you. God bless the United States. Thank you. All right. Your boy Genesis is signing out.